Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching second and final part of What If Naruto Hated Sakura after Sasuke Retrieval arc. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Jiraiya and Naruto strolled slowly to the arena, where they discovered a large crowd of people waiting and sitting, much like at the Chunin exam. When Naruto entered, he saw Tsunade in the cage box and all of his friends sitting upright. With the exception of Team Guy, who were on a mission, all of the rookies were seated in the front with their sensei. Ichiraku and Ayame shut down the store to watch their favorite customer in action, and the entire council was there. When Naruto entered, he noticed that everything had been the same as it had been during the Chunin exam 3 years prior. While Naruto waited for Kakashi to arrive in the center of the field, Jiraiya went upstairs in the cage box. In a whirl of leaves, Kakashi emerged in the center of the field, his orange book buried in his face. Kakashi decided to put the book away before the girls ruined it after noticing that everyone was there to witness the fight and that they were all staring at him while holding the book that his student had just given him. Genma entered the training area while holding a senbon. Genma looked at them both and asked, "Are you both ready?" "Believe it," Naruto uttered as he assumed the fox pose. Kakashi putting on his own style in, "Hi, go," Genma said. Kakashi hooked the bell to his pouch and said, "Naruto, all you need to do is get this bell from me." Naruto looked at his former sensei and said, "Okay." The first to attack, Kakashi appeared in front of Naruto and punched the boy in the stomach. Sensing the blow, Naruto leapt to his feet and flipped back, putting some distance between himself and his former teacher. Then, after performing some hand seals, Kakashi said, "Kaden, Gukaku no Jutsu. Fire style. Grand Fireball Jutsu," and a large fireball erupted from his mouth and headed toward the young boy at breakneck speed. Knowing that he wouldn't be able to avoid the fireball, Naruto said, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Shadow Clone Jutsu," and 2 clones appeared, one below him and one above him. He used the clone's back to gain leverage to jump, while the other clone pulled him up and flung him into the air. A little taken aback, Tsunade told Jiraiya he mastered the shadow clone. Jiraiya grinned and remarked, "And he uses it well." Observing the battle, Heishi remarked, "He's using the Kage Bunshin effectively." Since he couldn't predict the movements of his former students and couldn't see the hand seals to copy the jutsu, Kakashi was thinking quickly. He performed some quick hand seals while in the air, then said, "Kaden. Dai Enden. Fire style. Great fireball," and a large fireball came out of his mouth toward his former teacher. He then said, "Doden. Doryu Heki no Jutsu. Earth style. Earth wall," and an earthen wall formed in front of him, stopping the fireball from approaching him. When Kakashi cancelled the earth wall, Naruto landed on all fours in front of it and used all of his strength to punch him in the stomach. Because of the force of the blow, Kakashi retreated a few steps. Naruto leapt to his feet, twisted his body in midair, and kicked Kakashi. Kakashi used his left hand to block the kick while using his right to remove a kunai. When Shikaku watched the fight with interest, he said, "The boy improved if he can go toe-to-toe with Kakashi in taijutsu." In order to block Kakashi's kunai, Naruto pulled out his own, but Kakashi had already cut his cheek. Naruto then performed 3 back flips and pulled out 5 shuriken, 2 of which were clones of himself. He threw them at Kakashi, performed some hand seals, and then uttered the words, "Taju Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Multi-Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu," which caused the shurikens to multiply by 50 as they approached Kakashi. The majority of the shuriken were blocked by Kakashi while he was holding the kunai, but he managed to avoid a few by leaping into the air. During this time, the 2 shuriken changed back into Naruto's clone, and one of them took the bell. Kakashi then destroyed the other one, which turned out to be Naruto himself. Everyone was shocked when Naruto destroyed the clone that used the Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu because they hadn't seen him make any clones before. Naruto put the bell up with the peace sign and said, "Got you, sensei." "Good job, Naruto. I'm proud of you," Kakashi said as he approached his former pupil. Naruto looked at the man and said, "Thank you, Kakashi. Sensei." The young man was reminded of his fight with Neji in the same arena when everyone began clapping him. Looking at the boy in the arena, Ino remarked, "Wow, that can't be the same Naruto." Gazing at the arena, Kiba remarked, "I can't believe either, especially since he isn't using an army of clones like he usually did." With a muttered, "Good job, Naruto," Choji said. Tsunade looked at his teammate and asked, "What did you do with the boy?" "We trained continuously the entire time," Jiraiya smirked. Jiraiya looked at the Hokage and said, "It's time to see your student." "How about a little bet?" Jiraiya asked, grinning at Tsunade. Jiraiya smirked and said, "I'll stop hitting on you for a month if Sakura hits Naruto more than 5 times. Tsunade raised an eyebrow at him and asked, "And what she don't?" With a little blood streaming from his nose, Jiraiya giggled, "You have to let me see you naked." "I accept you as a pervert," Tsunade smirked. Jiraiya looked at his former teammate suspiciously and said, "Hold up, what are you up to? You're just going to let me see you naked without any threads attached?" Tsunade said, "Yes," without glancing at him. While performing some hand seals, Jiraiya thought, "Gaki, you better not let me down. Kachiyose no jutsu." Summoning jutsu, he said, calling forth a small messenger toad and communicating with Naruto in the arena. After making an appearance on Naruto's shoulder, the toad delivered the message to him. Looking at the boy, the little messenger toad said, "Naruto. Sama Jiraiya." Sama said, "Don't get hit by that girl more than 3 times because she has Tsunade's strength." "So do I go all out?" Naruto asked, pondering. The toad replied, "No, not yet." Before the small toad vanished in a cloud of smoke, Naruto said, "Okay. Please come down here, Sakura Haruto," Genma said, surveying the area. Sakura descended, wearing black gloves, and stood across from Naruto. Naruto grinned at her as he looked at her. "You guys ready?" Genma inquired, glancing at them both. "Yes," Sakura replied. "Believe it," Naruto said. "Go," Genma said. He sighed as he and Sakura stood in the vast field known as the Konoha Stadium. He had no idea why she was acting in this way, and he really didn't want to fight her because he would eventually have to hold back on her. Naruto was aware that her goal was to get him back by her side so she could use him to bring Sasuke back. Additionally, he believed that this wouldn't be too bad and was eager to see how strong she had grown since his last visit to Konoha. Sakura looked at Naruto with unwavering resolve. This was her opportunity to show him that she was a powerful kunoichi. Fighting him was the only way to demonstrate to him that she was no longer the same 12-year-old girl. If he saw her potential, he might recognize it and give her another chance, allowing them to pursue Sasuke as equals. She wanted to show that she was stronger than him, so she knew she wouldn't hold back on him. Sakura looked at Naruto and said, "Why didn't you agree to go have lunch with me?" "Because I had plans," Naruto replied, grinning at her. Sakura became irate and said, "You chased after me all that time, and when I want to go out with you, you decline. And the problem is," Naruto said, observing her intently. Sakura glared at him and yelled, "The problem is you should have been happy to go out with me." "Why is that?" calmly said Naruto. Sakura whispered, "Because you love me," as she gazed at the boy. She was unsure of the emotion, but she felt secure when she looked into his eyes. His blue eyes, his muscular body, and his wild yellow hair that he never combs. Naruto said, adopting his family's stance, loved, and every man got a limit on the shit they can take from a girl. Sakura charged at him and delivered a forceful blow to his head, using his left hand to strike the hand above his head and his right to strike her in the stomach, sending her a few yards away. He remained in the same position, waiting for her to attack him once more. She launched a barrage of punches and kicks at him, but Naruto either blocked or avoided them. She continued to throw punches and kicks in an attempt to surprise him, but Naruto simply stared at her as she blocked them. She was growing frustrated that she was unable to hit him even once. Sakura fiercely threw punches and kicks, yelling, "Naruto, you know you'll still chase after me. Don't flatter yourself." Sakura-chan made fun of Naruto, which infuriated the girl even more. "Oh shish. She's so mad," Ino said, glancing down. Shikamaru looked down at the arena and remarked, "Naruto is just playing with her, since he hasn't tried to attack yet." Sakura angrily threw a punch at Naruto, saying, "I'm going to prove here that me and Sasuke-kun was always stronger than you." Naruto became sidetracked and was struck in the stomach, which sent him flying back to the wall. Naruto said, "So that's why you wanted to fight me," as he stood up and dusted off his coat. Naruto calmly looked at her and said, "I guess I'll have to show you then, huh?" Sakura leapt into the air and charged at Naruto with a fierce kick. Naruto screamed as he ducked the pink-haired medic's flying hell kick, which destroyed the ground and reduced it to rubble. Then, for the first time, Naruto noticed that Sakura's strength was similar to Tsunade's superhuman strength. He knew that Tsunade herself had trained Sakura's medical skills, and he dodged a couple of her punches before she kicked him. He then countered with a punch, but the pink-haired medic dodged it, moving in front of him before she punched him and used an uppercut. Sakura wasn't finished, though, as she grabbed him while he was in midair and threw him hard to the ground with an uppercut. Naruto stood up, brushed himself off, and assumed his family's stance once more. With his fist ready, Naruto suddenly appeared in front of Sakura and punched her in the stomach so forcefully that blood spurted from her mouth. Everyone was in awe of the boy's quickness. To put some distance between them, Sakura leapt back, but it was insufficient because Naruto vanished. She thought he would approach her because he always did the same thing twice, but instead he appeared behind her and punched her in the back. She leapt in the air, but he leapt behind her and kicked her in the chest and stomach, sending her tumbling to the ground. After waking up with numerous bruises, she saw Naruto standing in front of her, his expression solemn. She took Naruto's hand to get up, but as soon as she did, she punched him, sending him flying. He then performed some flips in midair and pulled out his Namikaze sword. She was terrified when Naruto suddenly materialized in front of her because she was unaware that he was armed with a weapon. He looked up as soon as Naruto was in front of her and saw Jiraiya staring at him. He put the sword back in the glove and began performing quick hand seals before placing his hand on her forehead. Freeze, Naruto thought, and she was immobilized. She flew back to the wall after he punched her in the stomach. What was that? Genma inquired, glancing at the boy. A restraining seal, Naruto said, grinning at the man. Genma said, winner Naruto Uzumaki, grinning at the boy. Jiraiya jumped joyfully around the cage box and yelled, hit 3 times. You have 30 minutes to rest before your other fight, Tsunade said as she stood up and turned to face the crowd of people applauding the boy. Everyone was congratulating Naruto on his victories when he leapt into the arena's seating section to see his friends. Naruto truly wanted to speak with them, so he adopted the alias Shikamaru. When Shikamaru saw him approaching, he knew something was wrong. He and the other Junin senseis got up, and his classmates went to the back to speak with some of the fathers who were rooting for him by the stairs. Shikamaru looked at his friend and asked, what other fight? Naruto looked at his friends and said, that mummy-looking guy wanted to punish me for that little fight, so he put me in a fight with 5 other guys. What? Shikaku asked, considering the circumstances. Kiba looked at the boy and asked, is it 1 by 1 or all of them at once? I don't know, Naruto said, glancing at him. Kakashi looked at his pupil and asked, what are you going to do? The thing that I'm best at, doing me, Naruto grinned as he addressed his friends. Naruto grinned at his friend and remarked, arrow. Sennin told me not to hold back. Choji asked, glancing at the boy, what was that sword that you just had? Naruto said, they belong to my family, 1 to my mom and 1 to my dad, as he removed the swords from his grasp. The group was stunned to see the red and white swords in each hand, the craftsmanship of the swords, and the Namikaze sword's dragon. With stars in their eyes, everyone gazed at the swords. Naruto put the gloves back on the swords and stood up because the allotted time was almost up. Since the seal was still on her forehead, Sakura was still on the ground, unable to move a single muscle. Shikamaru laughed and remarked, Naruto, you forgot to take the seal of Sakura. Naruto and his friend laughed and said, I didn't forget. Naruto laughed and said, I'm going to show you something good. When he left them and started to move in the direction of the council members, Sume, who was seated nearby, burst out laughing. Everyone was staring at Naruto when he arrived and stood in front of them, grinning, knowing that he would do something amusing. Without a laugh, he stood before them grinning sweetly. Naruto looked at them gravely and said, pardon me. Homura, the elderly councilman, spat, what do you want, brat? Not you, Homo, Naruto remarked, glancing at the man. What did you say to him, boy? Kaharu screamed, her eyes dangerously fixed on the boy. Gazing at her, Naruto remarked, you heard me, old hag, I called him Homo and I wasn't talking to you. You will pay for this brat, Homura said as he stood up. Naruto pointed to Danzo, whose face remained straight but who was furious that the boy would treat him so disrespectfully, and said, I'm talking to Mr. Mummy.san over there. A large man wearing a shark mask and another wearing a crow mask appeared behind Naruto to take him down, but they both abruptly collapsed to the ground, dead. While everyone else was laughing at how composed Naruto was in the face of Danzo's murderous intent, Naruto turned around and saw Itachi and Kisame standing behind him. He simply grinned at them. Behind him, Kisame and Itachi remained motionless in case Danzo's roots returned in any other way. Naruto looked at the man and said, Mr. Mummy.san, my friends wanted to know if I was fighting my punishments at once or 1 by 1. Danzo grinned as he looked at the boy and said, at once. Danzo said, glancing at the boy, you will pay for this disrespect, boy. You need to know to respect your superior. I don't give respect out for no reason, and you did not earn my respect. You tried to have me banished from a village I spent my whole time in, away from the friends that I would give my life for. You keep treating people like toys to do your evil deeds. A village that I'm ready to give my life for over and over. You tried to get me banished over a traitor who left for power. I will bring him back to the village so that he can get his judgment for putting my friend's life in danger, even if I have to break every bone in his body. Neji, Kiba and Akamaru, Choji, Bushi, Brows, Shika almost died for him, and he's still left with you people treating him like the world did something to him, giving him things he did not work for, said Naruto, looking at the man with anger in his gaze. With sorrow in their eyes, everyone listened intently to what he had to say. The boy they had treated like a disease repeatedly proved to be their hero, while the one they had treated like a prince had betrayed them. As he spoke, Ino and Hinata even broke down in tears. Everyone was depressed, and Kakashi felt bad because he was among those who trained Sasuke like a prince without ever showing Naruto anything other than the tree climbing exercise. Naruto, dressed in his skin-tight dark orange shirt and black pants, leapt down to the arena, then leapt back up to give Hinata his coat. When the girls saw his toned body, they all flushed. Some even had blood oozing from their noses from the ideas they were having. Before the battle even began, 5 members of the Anbu root appeared in the arena, encircling Naruto with their Anbu swords. Go, Genma said. They all jumped at him simultaneously in an attempt to gain the upper hand. Naruto kicked one of the root members away with a strong kick, saying, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 3 clones then materialized beside him, preparing for the other 4 root members. One clone attempted to run toward the tallest of the root members but was destroyed in the process. As he came up with the ideal strategy to take down the root member, Naruto declared, Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu, and made 100 clones to fight alongside them. Before the 5 root members leapt back and performed hand seals, the clones were causing some damage. Kaden. Gukakyu no Jutsu. Fire Style. Grand Fireball Jutsu, caused a large fireball to emerge from his mouth, and Fuden. Daitopa no Jutsu. Wind Style. Great Breakthrough, caused the fire to grow larger when the wind struck it. The remaining clones were destroyed by a powerful gust of wind after the song, Fuden. Daitopa no Jutsu. Wind Style. Great Breakthrough, was played. Naruto leapt from his position, turned to face the root member, pulled out both of his swords, and dashed in his direction. While the other 4 fought the child who disregarded their master, the tallest of the root members stood back, waiting for an opening. One of the root members sent a deadly, accurate sword strike toward him, but he blocked it with his father's sword at the last second. The root member took a step back, thinking he had escaped the attack, but Naruto channeled some wind chakra to the sword, which lengthened the sword and cut the man in the torso. The root member leapt back again, but he was losing a lot of blood. Naruto said, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Shadow Clone Jutsu, and made 3 clones to support him in the battle. Naruto vanished and then reappeared behind the man, cutting him in half, because the root member who had been cut in the torso was losing a lot of blood and was unable to move at his usual speed. Since they had never witnessed someone being sliced in 2 in front of them, Hinata and Ino were on the verge of vomiting. Naruto turned around and was about to attack another root member when one of them punched him in the face, sending him flying a few yards away. Naruto slowly stood up after receiving a powerful blow. Danzo muttered, Damn it, I didn't think he would be able to kill one. Observing the fight, Heishi remarked, He is doing better than I expected. Katetsu recalled the first time they witnessed him battle Neji and remarked, He seems to calm down when fighting now. Because of how quickly he executed his hand seals, no one could see them. He also whispered, Kirigakure no Jutsu. Hidden Mist Jutsu, and the entire area where he was fighting was shrouded in a dense mist that was invisible to even the Hyugas. Since they couldn't see him, the root member simply stood there and waited for him to attack. Naruto used the jutsu because he needed time to gather his thoughts and because he needed to step up and defeat the guys before he suffered serious injuries. As Danzo looked around the arena, he wondered, why couldn't I copy this jutsu from him? When he realized that Kisame and Itachi were now in the village, Kakashi asked, who taught Naruto this jutsu? And came to the conclusion that Kisame had done so. Before canceling the mist, Naruto performed another series of fast hand seals, said, Gama Kachiyose no Jutsu. Kichi, Tatsu. Toad Summoning Jutsu. Kichi and Tatsu, and called forth his preferred summons. Naruto was about to kill the yellow headed child when two tongues struck him in the chest at superhuman speed, sending him flying back. The tallest root member was in front of him when he cancelled the mist, and he slashed his chest with a sword strike. Since their friend had just been attacked in front of them, the toads didn't need an explanation of what was happening. "I got him," Danzo grinned. "He's bleeding," Hinata remarked, her eyes sad and angry as she gazed at the boy on the ground. Gamakichi looked at the yellow-headed boy and asked, "What do you want, kid?" He saw Naruto on the ground, bleeding and covered in blood due to the deep cut. The fox began to heal the wound, and the cut began to close, allowing Naruto to stand up. Naruto stood up and turned to face his two toad friends, whom he had known since they were young and who formed a strong bond. Gamatsu whimpered as he gazed at the boy. "Naru.ni.san, did you bring me any candy?" Naruto said, "I'll get you some later," as he observed the toad straining to stay upright because his wound had not yet fully healed. "Gamakichi, buy me some time," Naruto said. "Let's go, Tatsu," Gamakichi yelled, leaping into the air. While performing some hand seals, Gamakichi said, "Give me some oil." Gamatsu performed a few hand seals because he wasn't used to the jutsu that much and he couldn't do it without any hand seals. When he said, "Gama Ninpo, Gamayuden, Toad Ninja Art, Toad Oil Jutsu," and spat out some oil from his mouth, Gamakichi said, "Kaden, Gamayu Emuden, Fire Style." Fire blowing, and a large fireball collided with the oil, enlarging it. Together, they yelled, "Kaden, Gamayu Enden, Fire Style, Toad Oil Flame Bullet," the name of the new fireball, Doden, Doryu Heki no Jutsu. Earth Style, Earth Wall, and an earthen wall formed in front of them in an attempt to stop the fireball. The fire struck the earth wall and broke it, but none of the root members were harmed because they leapt back to avoid the enormous fireball. Naruto jumped on the toad's back and yelled, "Gamatsu, throw me up in the air." Because they had previously practiced that jutsu with Naruto, Gamatsu threw him high in the air before himself, and Gamakichi leapt away from the root members. Everyone stared at him in shock as they saw Naruto in the air. After performing a few hand seals, Naruto pulled out his mother's sword and uttered the words, "Uzumaki Secret Technique, Raining Sword of the Whirlpool." A flurry of red, handleless swords began to rain down on the root members below. Before he could be struck by the rain, the tallest root member said, "Kawarimi no Jutsu," replacement jutsu, and replaced himself with a log. The other root members were unable to flee and attempted to dodge, but they were all killed before the fake swords vanished in red smoke. The bodies were spread out on the ground, covered in sword wounds and blood. Gamatsu lay down on the ground on his back just as Naruto was ready to land, and Naruto landed on the toad's stomach. Naruto stood in the center of the arena, his coat and shirt gone, only wearing a fishnet shirt, while Gamakichi and Gamatsu vanished in a puff of smoke. After losing 4 of his ninjas, Danzo thought, "Shish. I didn't think he would know this jutsu." Anko licked her lips while sitting next to Ibiki and thought, "Shish. I would do all kinds of things to this boy, what am I thinking, he's too young." Before she passed out, Sakura thought, "Dear Kami," as blood was streaming from her nose and she was unable to move or wipe it. Before anyone could see her, Ino thought, "That can't be the same Naruto we knew." She wiped her nose. Hinata exclaimed, "Naruto.kun," before collapsing in her chair. "Hinata, are you okay?" Ino asked, concerned for the girl. Kurenai looked at the blonde girl and said, "Don't worry about her, she's fine." "What are you thinking, Kurenai?" "Damn, that boy is hot," Kurenai thought, "bad girl," as she peered across the field. After the tallest root member emerged and stood across from Naruto, observing the boy through his mask, Naruto put his mother's sword away and turned to face the man gravely. The root member said, "You're good," as he assumed a taijutsu stance. Naruto said, adopting his family stance, "You too." In a full-fledged taijutsu battle, they ran toward one another. The man threw a punch at Naruto, but he blocked it and then threw one of his own. The root member dodged and swept beneath the boy's feet, and Naruto jumped before flipping and turning to the fox style. When Naruto was running toward him, the root member stood up and kicked the yellow-headed boy in the stomach before punching Naruto in the chest, sending the boy crashing to the ground. He had kicked the man on the side of his head and sent him flying. After getting up and deflecting a kick aimed at his head, Naruto kicked the man away. Before whispering, "Sweden, Bakusu Shuha no Jutsu, Water Style, Explosive Water Shockwave," Naruto performed a series of quick hand seals to put a small distance between himself and the root member. Then, he spat a lot of water out of his mouth, covering the entire arena with water that was 10 feet deep. Even though Sakura's clothes were already wet, Naruto made a clone that went to the corner and picked her up, removing her from the water. Tsunade asked, his eyes wide open, how is he able to produce such a vast amount of water out of nowhere? Gazing at the yellow-headed boy, Jiraiya remarked, spent a lot of time training and uses a lot of chakra. Jiraiya smirked and remarked, that root member is as good as dead now. Tsunade asked, why do you say that? As she gazed at the man in confusion. Jiraiya categorically stated, he's more deadly on water. Kiba looked at his sensei and asked, how is he able to create so much water out of nowhere? There's only 2 shinobis that I heard could create so much water out of nowhere, Hoshigaki Kisame, and the second Hokage of the Leaf, Kurenai said while staring at the arena. As Shino peered into the arena, he said, and now Naruto Uzumaki. Standing opposite the man, Naruto felt a little worn out, not from using a lot of chakra, but rather from the wound he had sustained earlier in the pressure of fending off 5 Junin-level shinobis who were closing in on him. Once again, they ran toward each other on a full taijutsu battle on the water, and the root member kicked him in the torso, sending him flying across the water field. Naruto got up when he heard the root member say, Sweden. Suiryuden no Jutsu. Water style. Water dragon bullet jutsu. And a giant water dragon emerged from the water and began to move toward the yellow-headed boy. Naruto performed some quick hand seals before saying, Sweden. Suijinheki no Jutsu. Water style. Water encampment wall jutsu, and the water rose up from the now small lake and formed a water wall in front of him, successfully stopping the water dragon. However, when the water wall collapsed, the root member appeared in front of him, kneeing him in the stomach before punching him across the water field. Grinning, Naruto stood up and performed a series of quick hand seals before saying, Uzumaki secret technique. Violent whirlpool, which caused the water throughout the field to turn into a dangerous and violent whirlpool. Kakashi asked, his normal eyes wide open as he looked around the arena, what is this jutsu? Looking into the arena, Asuma remarked, it's a whirlpool. Gazing into the arena, Kurenai questioned, how can he stand on such a dangerous whirlpool? With sorrow in his eyes, Kakashi said, Naruto, I truly betrayed you when I chose to train Sasuke rather than you. When the root member was already at the bottom of the enormous and dangerous whirlpool, Naruto went through another set of hand seals before saying, Sweden. Gashokuzane. Water style. 5 eating sharks. He then placed his right hand on the water, and 5 sharks formed from the tips of his fingers and began moving toward the root member. Before Naruto stopped all the jutsus and the water was removed from the arena, the water sharks dealt the root member some serious damage. Nice going kid, Kisame said, grinning beneath the mask. Naruto was running toward the root member so quickly that the only things the people saw were the blue sphere and the yellow hair, and the root member was barely able to stand when the Rasengan began to form in his right hand. As the root member slowly stood up, Naruto materialized in front of him, uttered the words, Rasengan. Spiraling sphere, and struck him in the torso with the fabled jutsu before he collapsed to the ground grinning, his body covered in numerous bruises from the battle. Naruto was too exhausted to move to defend himself, so one of the root members appeared out of nowhere brandishing a sword and quickly approached him. However, Shikamaru's words, Kageme no Jutsu, Shadow Possession Jutsu, caused his shadow to become attached to the root's shadow, and he abruptly stopped being unable to move. Naruto turned to see Shikamaru looking bored. Difficult. Shadow Possession success, Shikamaru remarked, glancing at his companion. On the ground, Naruto gazed at his friend and remarked, looks like I have enemies now. Shikamaru looked at the boy and said, we have enemies now, I can't let my future leader alone, you know, it's troublesome too. Shika, would you do the honor? Naruto asked, glancing at the boy. Shikamaru was performing some hand seals when a hand began to creep up the neck of the root. Yeah, Kage Kyubi Shibari no Jutsu. Shadow neck bind technique. The hand then constricted in such a way that it strangled the root member. When Naruto attempted to enter the arena, everyone leapt down to it, but he immediately fell back to the ground. Hinata began tending to his body, blushing profusely as she felt his hard muscles and the intensity of his body. His body was still sore even though the wound marks had already disappeared from his skin, while Ino was tending to the unconscious Sakura in the arena's corner. With his eyes wide open, Kiba screamed, what the hell? With his eyes open, Shikaku asked, what was that jutsu? Kiba looked at the boy and remarked, that looks exactly like the one the old man used that night. What old man? Naruto asked feebly. Kutame-san, Shoji said, glancing at the boy and recalling the tale Kiba had told them. Naruto laughed and remarked, "Oh, Gramps used that jutsu here, probably someone pissed him off." Shikaku whispered to Choza, who was standing next to him, "I wouldn't be surprised if Naruto became the Hokage of the village. The kids trust him, and he trusts them too, characteristic of a true leader," said Choza with a grin. "Why wouldn't he be thinking about who his father is?" asked Heishi, grinning briefly. Looking at the boy, Ino said, "Naruto is so strong now, he can't be the same little shrimp from 5 years ago. And he's adorable too," she thought again. Tsunade and Jiraiya leapt from the cage box and stood in the arena, grinning, watching them. After congratulating Naruto, Tsunade gestured to Sakura, who was still motionless on the ground. Sakura was furious when Naruto approached her and removed the seal from her forehead because she had been claiming for the past 6 months that she could easily defeat Naruto, but the exact opposite occurred. After Naruto helped her, she got up and lowered her head to face Tsunade, recalling how she had threatened to beat him when he returned from his training trip. Sakura understood why everyone was laughing when they noticed that she had her head down. Tsunade said, "Uzumaki Naruto," as she gazed at the boy. "What Chan?" asked Naruto, grinning as he turned to face his mother figure. "Girls, please respect him," Tsunade grinned. He was struck in the head by Sakura and Ino. Hinata looked at the boy and said, "Answer politely, Naruto-kun." Holding his head, Naruto said, "Okay, geez." "Yes, Chan," Naruto said, glancing intently at Tsunade. As Tsunade approached him and punched him back against the arena wall, everyone, including Jiraiya, retreated from her until they were far away. "That's supposed to be better," she yelled. With his face swollen from the punch, Naruto emerged from the hole he had made in the wall and approached the Hokage. Naruto glared at Tsunade and yelled, "What the hell, Chan? Just answer me correctly, idiot," Tsunade yelled, glaring at the boy. His expression abruptly became emotionless as he placed his hands in his pockets. Tsunade said, "Uzumaki Naruto," without revealing his face. Tsunade scowled when Naruto said, "Yes, Hokage." Sama, in a monotone. She could not read his face and he was not displaying any emotion. Naruto wasn't the same playful person she had seen a few minutes before. Tsunade looked at the boy and said, "Now you're creeping me out." Tsunade continued to gaze at Naruto as she said, "Hitaki Kakashi and Haruno Sakura." They both said, "Yes, Hokage." "Sama. You will all now be Team Kakashi," Tsunade said, blushing as she gazed at Naruto. "Kakashi. Sensei, Arrow. Senin, would you like some ramen?" Naruto asked, grinning as he looked at his senseis. Jiraiya said as she left, "I have something to take care of, Kakashi, take care of the boy and don't let him get into any more trouble." Kakashi said, "I have some things to take care of, Naruto. I'll see you later," before vanishing in a cloud of smoke. Along with Shikamaru, Kiba and Akamaru, Choji, and Ino, Naruto began to leave the arena. "Naruto," Tsunade uttered, glancing at his back. "Is there a problem, Hokage?" "Sama?" Naruto asked in the same monotone as before. Tsunade looked at the boy and asked, "What is your problem talking to me like that?" Naruto looked at his mother figure and said, "How am I talking to you? That's how a ninja is supposed to respond to his superior, right?" "Yes, but..." Tsunade began, but the boy interrupted her. "Don't let Sakura's pastime of hitting me for fun get to you," Naruto said, glancing at the woman. Tsunade approached Naruto and yelled, "How dare you compare me to Sakura?" But he made no move. Tsunade kissed Naruto on the forehead and said, "Look, Naruto, I'm sorry for treating you like that." Naruto said, "Chan, you're getting soft," removing his emotionless expression and fleeing from the woman. "You fooled me, brat. I'll get your ass," Tsunade yelled, grinning as she watched Naruto flee. The boy with the yellow hair made everyone laugh. "You're coming, Yoshika," Naruto said, glancing at his companion. "Yeah, hold on," Shikamaru said as he approached his friend slowly. To simply relax and hang out, they all go to the Ichiraku ramen stand, where Naruto typically eats. Shino only spoke when they spoke to him, ate in silence, and listened to their conversations. The person sitting closest to Naruto, Hinata, was flushed. Tsunade sealed the room she was in, which was in the living area at the base of the Hokage Tower where she stayed, saying, "If I have to let you see me naked, you have to take your clothes off too." In order to wait for her to remove her clothing, Jiraiya removed his top and stood in front of her. Jiraiya smirked and said, "That was not part of the deal." "Whatever, Baka," Tsunade said, beginning to undress. She finished and stood fully nude before the beaming toad sage. Tsunade grinned and said, "Your turn, Baka." Jiraiya looked at her and said, "That was not part of the deal." Tsunade watched Jiraiya's dick harden while tearing the pants off his lower body. When Tsunade dragged Jiraiya to the bed, she was beaming. Jiraiya was on his back after Tsunade shoved him to the bed, and she leaned over to begin playing with his now hard dick. Jiraiya grinned even more when Tsunade stopped playing with his dick and smirked at him, sticking her tongue out and licking it. Tsunade began to deep-throat his dick after sucking on it more and more forcefully. Then, as Jiraiya resumed sucking on the dick, Tsunade got it and pressed her pussy in her face. As she played with his dick, Jiraiya began to lick her pussy and play with her clit. Tsunade stood up from her current position and turned to Jiraiya, grinning. Jiraiya was a little let down because he was having so much fun tasting her large pussy, but he soon realized what was coming next and grinned once more. Tsunade climbed on top of him, grabbed his dick, and inserted it into her large pussy. She screamed in both pleasure and pain as he grabbed her large tits and began sucking on her nipples, all the while riding his dick harder and harder. Tsunade, determined to have fun, was jumping up and down Jiraiya's dick while groaning loudly and calling her name. After releasing her breast, Jiraiya performed some hand seals and sealed the room with a soundproof seal to ensure that no one could hear. Tsunade was now on Jiraiya's back, and he was on top of her, sucking on her nipples and fucking her pussy. Despite the length of time they had been having sex, neither of them was growing weary. He put his dick in her asshole after forcing Tsunade to put her hands on the bed and bend over with her ass facing him. She screamed even louder than the first time, but she was still enjoying it. He fucked her asshole until she was unable to bear the pain any longer and fell to the ground with her ass still up. She got up and placed her hand on the bed once more, grinning back at him. They were perspiring, the entire room was disorganized, and both her and his hair were in disarray, but they continued to work on it. She arrived and collapsed on the bed approximately 30 minutes later. She stood up and began sucking his dick until he covered her face, at which point they both collapsed onto the bed, grinning broadly. Jiraiya whispered, "I owe you big time, Gaki," but Tsunade heard him and grinned. Tsunade looked into his eyes and laughed, liked it. Jiraiya looked at her and laughed, "You kidding, right? Jiraiya, do you think Naruto will ever forgive Sakura?" Tsunade asked, observing him intently. "Yeah," Jiraiya said candidly, "but I don't think it's going to be anytime soon." Considering the information that Itachi and Kisame had given him, Jiraiya remarked, "It's exactly 3 years, Akatsuki is on the move again. I have to go to the office, so I'll see you later," Tsunade said as she got up and put on her clothes. "You ripped my fucking pants," Jiraiya chuckled as she pulled out a scroll to do some laundry. Tsunade looked at him and laughed, "You didn't want them off, I couldn't wait." Alongside the boy with the yellow hair, Temari was preparing to go back to Suna as everyone else went home to prepare for the following day. Naruto, who has always enjoyed visiting this place, was standing atop the Hokage monument, precisely on the head of the 4th Hokage. He always went here to unwind and forget about his problems because it was the greatest place for him to decompress. He recalls how often he used to come here in the past whenever he was despised by the villagers. He always felt calm and relaxed here, no longer feeling sad or angry. He found that the Leaf Village's breathtaking scenery was the main source of his relaxation. At times, he even called out aloud that he would one day realize a dream he had been longing to achieve. Because of his predicament with a certain pink-haired kunoichi, he needed to unwind right now, which is why he was here. He could still clearly recall what had transpired between him and Sakura earlier. Since Sakura had harmed him too often in the past, he was genuinely terrified of letting her back into his life for fear that she would do so again. Even after Sasuke left the village after hurting her, she still missed him and wanted him back in her life, and her tearful face was enough to persuade him that she was telling the truth. Perhaps she truly believed that he was always weaker than Sasuke. However, he was still unable to move on from the past, including all of the abuse and taunts she had given him. He became enraged at the idea because she wanted him to return her gold Uchiha medal as a silver medal, but that was not going to happen. "I guess a good fight will get my mind straight," Naruto chuckled as he walked out of the Hokage mountain in a strong wind. In Suna, he didn't want to fight in the middle of the village because of the damage that would occur, so Gaara fled from Deidara and headed for the forest. On top of his bird, Deidara threw bombs at Gaara, who dodged them with lightning speed. Occasionally, the sand would rise up and block some of the bombs. The members of Akatsuki were growing impatient since they did not want the cage to have any backup. When Gaara got a little further away from the desert village, he finally stopped. It was freezing at night, but that wasn't what they were thinking about. Kachiyose no Jutsu. Summoning Jutsu, was said by Gaara, who performed some hand seals and conjured a small raccoon dog to deliver a message to his friend. As he swiftly performed the same hand seals, Gaara said, "Go to Konoha and tell Jiraiya Sama that the Akatsuki are on the move again." He then uttered the words, Kachiyose no Jutsu. Summoning Jutsu, and conjured a large raccoon dog as large as Shukaku. The large raccoon dog said, "Hey, Gaara, what is it?" "We have a battle to fight Shuku-san," Gaara stated in his regular monotone. "All right, let's enjoy ourselves," the large raccoon dog yelled. Fuden. Renkuden. Wind release, drilling air bullet, the large raccoon dog said before a large air bullet headed toward the bird Deidara was standing in front of. Deidara took some clay out of his pouch and placed it in his right hand's mouth to prepare it for his artwork. He then threw the clay into the air and used a one-handed seal to send a large spider at the large raccoon, which exploded as soon as it made contact, injuring the big summon. Sand emerged from Gaara's small pouch and began moving toward the bombing expert, but the sand followed him. The sand eventually caught Deidara's hand, and Gaara said, "Sabaku Q. Desert Coffin," closing his fist to crush the bombing master's left arm. Deidara screamed in agony as his left arm became completely useless. He took some clay out of his pouch and, after removing his coat, he placed it in his chest's mouth, which began to chew it. He then took the clay and formed it into a small dragon, which grew larger after he performed a few hand seals. The raccoon grinned as he smirked and performed some seal work, causing the ground's sand to transform into a large rock ball. The raccoon uttered the words, "Doten. Dai Iwaden. Earth Style. Great Rock Bullet," and the rock ball began to move dangerously fast in the direction of the Akatsuki member. Deidara used his chakra to move the dragon away from the perilous attack as he rose through the air. Gaara was knocked off his summons when the dragon exploded on the large raccoon, and the raccoon vanished in a cloud of smoke, leaving Gaara to fight alone. Gaara rose and charged at full speed toward Deidara, encircling the clay animal with his sand. The bird exploded, knocking Deidara to the ground as the sand absorbed the blow. Gaara struck Deidara in the face, causing blood to flow from his mouth, and then Sasori came up behind him, injecting him with a potent sleeping drug that rendered the cage unconscious. Deidara said as she stood up, "I didn't know he was that strong, he wasn't said to be that fast in the report." Sasori glared at his partner and said, "Let's go, I hate keeping people waiting." After failing to locate Jiraiya in the Hidden Leaf Village, the small raccoon dog that Gaara had sent the message with went in search of Naruto. Naruto was very good at suppressing his chakra signature, so it was very difficult for the little raccoon dog to follow it. However, since it was still night, the little messenger discovered Naruto sleeping in his home. After searching the house for Naruto, the small raccoon dog waited for the boy to wake up in front of the door since he was unable to enter. Sasori as well as Deidara, because a sandstorm was approaching and they might become lost if they couldn't find a safe place to stay, Sasori and Deidara decided to spend the night inside a cave. They took turns keeping an eye on the unconscious cage to make sure he didn't start any more trouble after placing him in the corner of the cave. As the sun began to rise and the sandstorm grew weaker, they realized they had to leave. As their rescue team got ready to pursue Gaara, Kankuro managed to catch up to the two Akatsuki members in the hopes of slowing them down. However, he was unsuccessful because Sasori was able to dodge every move he threw at the S-rank puppet user and knew all of his puppet's moves. Sasori gave the cage's older brother a poison injection and struck him with the tail of the puppet he was using. They were still a long way from their destination, even though Deidara was already far ahead. When the rescue crew saw Kankuro unconscious on the ground while en route to pursue Gaara, they made the decision to take him back to the village for medical attention because it appeared that he was in a lot of pain. When Kankuro opened his eyes and turned to face his former Junin sensei, Baki wanted to speak with the boy. Struggling, Kankuro uttered, "Baki. Sensei, it was Sasori of the Red Sand, and he knew all my moves." Gazing at the man, Baki said, "What, don't try to talk. Since Konoha is sending a team, we need to get a bigger team set up," Baki realized after giving the matter some thought. Baki ordered, glancing at the other shinobis, "We need to get Kankuro back to the village and make a bigger team. I'll be in Konoha the following day." After receiving the message from their ally Suna, Tsunade was getting ready to send a team to the rescue mission. She was aware that only one team could go because, at the very least, some of them were accustomed to dealing with the Akatsuki. Since Jiraiya always protected the boy and would risk his life to protect him, Tsunade did not want to send Naruto after the Akatsuki without him. However, she was aware that Jiraiya had taught Naruto enough to be self-sufficient after witnessing him kill 5 root members. Tsunade looked at her apprentice and said, "Shizune, get me Hinata and Team 7. "Hello, Lady Tsunade," Shizune exclaimed as she hurried from the room. Tsunade was concerned, thinking, damn, Jiraiya was right about Akatsuki on the move. Naruto. After hearing someone or something calling his name outside, Naruto woke up in his room and went downstairs to eat because he was hungry. When he opened the compound door, he noticed the small raccoon dog sitting by the gate. Since he received the contract directly from Shukaku, Naruto was already aware that only Gaara was able to call forth that kind of animal. To confront the small messenger summon, Naruto picked up the small raccoon. "What is it?" worried Naruto asked. The small summoner said, "Gaara. Sama instructed me to inform you that the Akatsuki is in motion." "So they went after him?" inquired Naruto, growing increasingly anxious. "Yes, Naruto-san," the small summoner said. Naruto said, "You can go," before vanishing in a yellow flash and resurfacing in the restroom. After cleaning himself up, Naruto put on his clothes and prepared all of his ninja equipment. When he came downstairs, Itachi was already outside training with a black crow, and Kisame was just waking up. When Naruto waved to them, Kisame smiled, and Itachi's expression remained emotionless as usual. Kisame looked at the boy and smiled. "Where are you going so early, brat?" Naruto said, "I'm needed in the Hokage Tower," but he fled the compound in a strong wind. Kisame yelled to no one in particular, "Hey, come back here, brat, and get the food." Kisame whimpered, "What the hell am I going to eat?" On top of the crow, Itachi said in a monotone, "There's food in the kitchen, just cook something or go to the ramen stand." "Whatever," Kisame said as he made his way to the large kitchen. Naruto. With a great gust of wind, Naruto entered the office and ruined all of the documents. When Tsunade noticed the papers everywhere, a vein in her forehead burst. Before retreating to the back of the office, safe from her fist, Naruto gave her a quick glance. She was about to approach him and beat him, but she decided not to waste any more time and instead sat down. With a vein ticking on her forehead, Tsunade yelled at the boy, "Pick them up, idiot, and don't be using that jutsu to come to the office knowing you're going to mess up everything." Naruto looked at the woman and laughed, "Good morning to you too, Ba-chan." Naruto said, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Shadow Clone Jutsu," without using a single hand seal, and 5 clones burst out laughing behind him. "You heard her," Naruto chuckled, glancing at Tsunade. The clones picked up the papers that Naruto had messed up after Tsunade yelled, "Pick them up." Kakashi entered the office with one hand in his pocket and his face buried in the orange book. Sakura was not far behind him, wearing bandages on her forehead and left arm from her battle with Naruto. Although she had healed her body, it wasn't completely healed because Naruto had frozen her body for more than an hour. Hinata greeted everyone and stood in the back of the room, sticking her fingers together, as she saw Team 7 and began to question why she was there. Shizune rushed into the room, but she didn't see Naruto at his previous apartment. She also didn't see Naruto in the office because she was in a rush to inform Tsunade that the yellowhead was missing. Shizune caught her breath and said, "Lady Tsunade, I did not see Naruto at his apartment." Naruto said, "I'm right here, Shizune-ne-chan," from the rear of the room. Shizune asked, "What happened here?" as she noticed the clones gathering papers. Tsunade glared at Naruto and pointed to the yellow-headed boy, saying, "His wind body flicker." Shizune said, perplexed, "Your old apartment was empty," as she peered at the boy with the yellow hair. Naruto looked at the girl and said, "I moved to my dad's house, so I don't live there anymore." "Oh," Shizune said, cutting off. Naruto, who was standing next to his team captain, said, "Yo Kakashi. Sensei, what's up?" "Yo," Kakashi said as he hung the peace sign. Naruto said, "Hinata-chan, how was your night?" as he approached the girl and spoke quietly. Hinata blushed and said, "W. was fine. How about you, Naruto-kun?" Naruto grinned and touched the girl's flushed face, saying, "It was good, but you could always make it better for me." After that, Hinata passed out. "Nice one, Naruto," Kakashi thought, grinning beneath the mask. The humiliated Hyuga princess was awakened by Tsunade's yell, "Stop that, you pervert, I'm going to kick Jiraiya's ass for what he did to my innocent Naruto-kun. Naruto teasingly looked at the elderly woman and said, I knew you were getting soft Chan. Sakura lowered her face and thought, damn, Naruto talking to her like that in front of me, what the hell am I thinking? Tsunade threw a stapler at the yellow-headed boy, saying, shut up. The boy caught it in front of his face and returned it to Shizune. As Jiraiya informed her that they had developed a close bond over the years, Tsunade prepared for Naruto's response by saying, it appears that the Akatsuki captured the cage and Suna asked for some assistance from us to get him back. Hinata and Sakura were already accustomed to killing intent because Tsunade constantly used hers on them during training to ensure they would be prepared when a strong opponent tried to frighten them, but the one that Naruto released was inhuman because it was so wild and powerful. What? He yelled, letting all of his chakra go wild, which had them frozen in place. Kakashi placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder and said, Naruto. Naruto looked at his sensei and said, we're taking the mission, right, Kakashi, sensei? Yes, Kakashi replied as he put the orange book away. Tsunade looked at the group and said, Kakashi Hatake, Naruto Uzumaki, your third member for this mission will be Hinata Hyuga. Gazing at the Hokage, Sakura questioned, what about me? Tsunade looked at her and said, you are not yet fully recovered, so you are not prepared for this mission. Sakura thought, glaring at Hinata, there goes my chance to help Naruto. However, Lady Tsunade. Sakura attempted to argue. Tsunade looked at the girl and said, no buts, Naruto had your entire body frozen for more than an hour. Naruto scratched the back of his head and said, my bad. Looking at Kakashi, Tsunade said, Team Guy will be your backup for this mission. Tsunade looked at the team captain and said, go to Suna, and you'll be under their command. Kakashi. Sensei, let's go. Gaara is in trouble, Naruto said as he approached the window. Looking back at his sensei, Naruto remarked, you got everything ready, right? As he approached the window, Kakashi remarked, no, I did not know why we were called here. In 15 minutes, I'll meet you at the front gate, Kakashi said as he leapt out the window. Naruto, seated on the window, said, okay. Tsunade said, you are dismissed, Sakura. Sakura left the house and went home knowing that she detested Hinata now that Naruto preferred the Hyuga princess over her. In order to meet Naruto at the front gate, Hinata went home to pack her belongings, and Kakashi followed suit. Shizune was considering the circumstances surrounding Hinata's involvement in the mission alongside Naruto. Shizune asked, glancing at her leader, do you think it is okay to send Hinata on a mission with Naruto? Tsunade looked at Shizune and said, as long as he doesn't start flirting with her, and as you saw he's serious right now. Looking at her master, Shizune asked, why do you say that? Given that they both possess tailed beasts, Gaara is like a brother to Naruto, and Gaara views him as such. That's why he's so eager to help Gaara, Tsunade remarked, reflecting on what Jiraiya had discussed with her. Oh, Shizune uttered as she left the office. 10 minutes later, the front gate opens. As he stood in the front gate with everything he owned, he noticed Hinata approaching, followed closely by Kakashi, who was growing increasingly eager to go and save his brother. When they reached the front gate, they were prepared to leave, and Naruto hurried out of it, running toward his brother's house. They leapt from tree to tree at a high speed, and Naruto was far ahead of them. He wanted to try out the Hirishin to get there, but he wasn't sure how to use it yet. He could only use it up close, and then he had an idea to get there more quickly. Looking down, Naruto saw Temari walking down the road toward her house. With Kakashi and Hinata following him, Naruto jumped down from the tree and exclaimed, Temari-san. You heard that Gaara was kidnapped by the Akatsuki, right? What? Temari exclaimed, glancing at the yellow head. Naruto looked at the girl and said, yeah, we are on our way there now. Naruto looked at his sensei and said, Kakashi. Sensei, I have a way to get there faster. How? Kakashi asked, glancing at the boy. Naruto looked at the man and said, you have to promise not to tell. Sure, Kakashi replied, staring at him bewildered. After biting his thumb and smearing blood across his palm, Naruto performed some hand seals and uttered the words, Kuchio's no Jutsu, summoning Jutsu. Two lions the size of horses materialized in front of him, and when they turned to see who it was, they realized it was Naruto. One of the lions said, how can I help you, Naruto-sama? Why? You? Kakashi stammered in surprise. Temari looked at the boy and remarked, I had never heard of anyone calling forth lions before. Naruto stated, my mom did, and my mom's family does. Naruto looked at the lions the size of horses and said, "We have to get to Suna quickly." The lions simultaneously said, "Get on." The lions headed toward Suna at full speed, and the entire journey was silent because the lions were traveling so fast. 12 hours later, they reached the gate of the village hidden in the sand, where they saw evidence of a large battle that had taken place in the forest. Naruto knew that Gaara wouldn't fight in the middle of the village if he could avoid it, so he got off the lions and they headed back home. Hinata was about to board one of the lions when Temari pulled her to sit with him, and Kakashi and Naruto were on the other lions. "Welcome back, Temari. Sama. Kankuro is currently in the hospital," the guard said, bowing to the sister of the Kazekage. "Welcome, Leaf Nins," the guard said. After following Temari to the hospital where Kankuro was, Kakashi, Hinata, and Naruto grew increasingly irritated because he had to wait for orders before pursuing Gaara. They arrived at the hospital and heard the medics fighting to keep Kankuro down because his body was injured all over and the poison was eating away at his insides. As soon as they entered the room, they saw Kankuro on the hospital bed, shifting his body, and an elderly woman jumped and ran toward him to attack him. The old woman ran toward Kakashi and yelled, "This is for my son you killed White Fang." Kakashi was startled when the woman approached and raised his hands, and she threw a punch at him, which he blocked by jumping in front of him. The woman then jumped back and threw another punch at him, which he avoided. Naruto jumped back and yelled, "Why the hell are you attacking my sensei, old lady?" Naruto thought, that old lady can pack one hell of a punch, as he observed her. An elderly man sitting in the room's corner stood up and said, "Chan, that's not the White Fang, remember, he died a few years ago." With his hands motionless, Kakashi said, "I'm Kakashi Hitaki, and the White Fang was my father." Everyone's perspiration dropped as they watched the elderly woman laugh. "I knew that." Looking at her brother on the bed, Temari asked, "How is Kankuro, Chio, Sama?" Naruto looked at the girl and said, "Hinata-chan, you studied under Ba-chan, right?" Why? Yes, Hinata replied, glancing at the boy. Naruto grinned and said, "Can't you help him?" Hinata said, "Hi," and then she said, "Byakugan," using her dujutsu to examine the man. Upon noticing the poison on his lungs, she hurried to see what she could do. Hinata put her hair up in a ponytail and said, "Please get me some warm water." As she approached him, Hinata remarked, "The poison is on his lungs and eating the inside of his body." When the nurse returned with the warm water, Hinata placed it on a table near the bed because she knew it would require all of her focus and she didn't want Kankuro to be moving around while she extracted the poison. "Please hold him down," Hinata said, and the puppet master was restrained by Naruto, Temari, and a number of other nurses. As Kankuro screamed, Hinata poured her chakra into the water, creating a bubble between her palms, going through his body and removing the poison, then putting the used water in an empty container and taking more water and repeating the process. After removing the poison from Kankuro's body, she went with a nurse to gather herbs to make an antidote. Kankuro tried to sit up and said, "Naruto, stay down," Temari said anxiously. Naruto turned around and asked, "What is it, Kankuro?" Everyone in the room was taken aback when Kankuro said, "Please bring my brother back." "Gaara," Kankuro said, beginning to tell Naruto a story. This is a flashback. After the fight with Gaara and Shukaku, Naruto was on his stomach and crawling toward Gaara, but he was unable to crawl properly because both of them were exhausted from the fight. "Stay away from me," Gaara screamed, terrified. Naruto continued to crawl in the direction of the one-tailed Jinchuriki and declared, "As long as you pose a threat to my friend, I will do everything in my power to destroy you." "Why?" Gaara asked, glancing at the boy approaching him, "You just mentioned how poorly they treated you." With his body failing him, Naruto declared, "I still want to protect them, protect my home." Looking at the nine tails Jinchuriki, Gaara thought, "Protect my home." And now, 1 month later, standing atop a building overlooking the village, Kankuro and Gaara had just returned from the mission with the Leaf team, who had come to Gaara's aid. Gaara turned to his older brother and grinned, and Kankuro grinned back because he knew that the boy rarely smiled. "I'm sorry, Kankuro," Gaara said, glancing at his brother. Sorry for what Gaara said, Kankuro chuckled. "For everything, I would still be the same crazy boy listening to Shukaku if I hadn't met Naruto. I owe Naruto my life because he opened my eyes and became my first true friend," Gaara said, gazing up at the sky. Gaara continued to gaze up at the sky as Kankuro listened, saying, "As he told me, when you fight to protect your precious people, that is when you show your true strength. For that from now on, I will fight to protect everyone in the village. Like Naruto, I want to become the Kazekage and protect them," Gaara said with a grin. Gazing at his brother, Gaara remarked, "I know we will fight together again, but as friends." With a few tears streaming down his face, Kankuro said, "Thank you Naruto for my brother." End of flashback. That's what Gaara said, Naruto inquired, his eyes watering. Yes, Kankuro replied, still having difficulties. Naruto gave him the thumbs up and said, "Don't worry about it, Kankuro. Gaara is like a brother to me and I will bring him back even at the cost of my life." Temari sobbed as she said, "Thank you, Naruto." Baki entered the room, heard everything Kankuro had to say, and realized he needed to discuss the mission with Kakashi. Baki looked at Kakashi and remarked, "He's joking about his life part, right?" Kakashi looked at the Sanjunin and said, "No, I don't know what it is, but he's just waiting for orders to go after Gaara." Baki looked at the slothful man and said, "Well, you can go when you're ready." They headed toward the Land of Fire. In order to locate the base where Gaara was supposed to be, Kakashi said, "Kachiyose no Jutsu." Summoning Jutsu. 8 nin dogs materialized in front of him in a cloud of smoke. Gazing at his master, Pakun said, "Hey there, Kakashi." Kakashi looked at his summons and said, "Yo Pakun, you still have Gaara's scent right?" Pakun inquired, "You mean the kid from the Chunin exam?" "Yes," Kakashi replied. "Please follow his scent and let me know when you find him," Kakashi said, and all of the dogs swiftly vanished as they followed the Kazecage's scent. As he looked at Baki, Kakashi asked, "Do you know who we're dealing with?" Baki's statement, "One uses bombs and the other is Sasori of the Red Sand," left Chio speechless. Chio walked toward the room's window and said, "I'll be going with you." However, Temari said, "He's my grandson and I'm going." Chio exclaimed as she leapt to her feet and ran home to gather her belongings. Naruto walked toward the window and asked, "What are we still doing here, Kakashi? Sensei?" Before Kakashi dragged him back by his coat. Naruto followed Kakashi as he left the hospital room, saying, "We don't know where we are going, so I sent my dogs to find the place." Hinata asked the medic next to her, "Do you have any herbs around here?" "Yes, given that we are in the middle of a desert, the herb garden is quite tiny." The medic said, "Follow me," as she left the room, Hinata following. Once again, we are in the Hidden Leaf Village. Tsunade gave them the mission scroll and said she was waiting for another mission as Team Guy, who had just arrived in the village, made their way to the Hokage's office to report their mission, entered the office, and looked at them gravely. Tsunade said, "Team Guy, I have a backup mission for you," as she peered at them. He gave the Hokage the thumbs up. "We will be glad to back another team with our flames of youth," Guy said. "I'm Guy. Sensei." With 2 lines of tears in his eyes, Lee said. "Lee." Guy said, appearing the same. Tenten punched both of them in the head before they could embrace and the genjutsu materialized, leaving them both on the ground with lumps on their heads. Tenten glared at her teammates and yelled, "Stop it, you two." Bowing before her teacher, Tenten said, "I'm very sorry, Tsunade-sama." Tsunade said, glancing at Team 7, "You will support them." Lee gave them the thumbs up, saying, "I will have to test my flames of youth against Naruto-san. You will be their backup." Team 7 went as a rescue team to retrieve the Kazekage after he was abducted by a gang of S-class criminals. When they discover the location, Kakashi will send one of his nin dogs after you. Take Shikamaru with you. I have a suspicion that Naruto will be in trouble. Go now, Tsunade said, glancing at them. While Lee went to find Shikamaru, Neji, Guy, and Tenten waited by the gates. Shikamaru was playing shogi with his father when he heard a knock on the gate of his family compound. He went to open the gate and saw that Lee was standing in front of his house. Shikamaru was so bored that he asked, "What is it, Lee?" Lee gave him the thumbs up and said, "You're part of it, Shikamaru-san, and we're heading out on a mission." Difficult, Dad, I have a mission. Shikamaru waved to his dad. Shikaku waved to his only son and said, "Sure." Lee informed Shikamaru that the rest of his team was waiting for them when they started running toward the gates. When they arrived at the gates, they saw that the rest of Team 9 was also waiting for them. Without exchanging words, they went toward the Sand Village to meet with Team 7, where Neji gave Shikamaru an explanation of the mission while Lee and Guy continued to talk endlessly about flames of youth. With Kakashi. In order to report to their master, Pakun and the other nin dogs returned with the location of the Akatsuki hideout, and he began to make his way back to the Sand Village, where they proceeded to Kakashi's room. Naruto, who was already growing impatient. Had it not been for all those meditation sessions with Jiraiya and Itachi, he would have already left to find his brother was walking up and down the area, waiting for Pakun to return. Pakun, panting from running non-stop, said, "Kakashi, we found the location." Kakashi called for Naruto to get ready and said, "Thank you Pakun, rest a little while we get ready to head out." Naruto called out to the small dog he recognized from the Chunin exam, "Hey Pakun." "Hey there, Naruto," the small dog said, "You're a little shrimp anymore, are you?" Naruto looked at the small dog and said, "No, you found the location right." Pakun looked at the boy and said, "Yeah, once the team is ready, I will lead you there." "Naruto, get ready, we're leaving," Kakashi said, glancing at the boy. "Yes," Naruto replied, darting from the room in an instant. Naruto rearranged all of his weapons, made sure his sword was in its proper place, and ran back to the hospital room where Hinata had finished creating the poison's counteragent so they could depart. The two of them descended the stairs and found Kakashi waiting for them with Chio and Kakashi's nin dogs. Kakashi asked, "Are you guys ready?" as he observed them. "Yes," Naruto replied, his eyes full of resolve as he looked at his sensei. Kakashi looked at the small dog and said, "Pakun, go find team and lead them to the hideout." Pakun asked, glancing at his master, "How are you going to get there?" Naruto grinned at the small dog and said, "I'll find the place, my nose is not as good as Kiba, but I can find Gaara." Before the lions could see him, Naruto ran inside the hospital and went to find Temari. The 8 nin dogs left for the forest to find Team Guy, but Naruto bit his thumb and performed some hand seals more quickly than anyone could follow. He then said, "Kachiyose no Jutsu," summoning Jutsu, and he conjured a small lion the size of the bulldog in Kakashi's nin dogs. Naruto asked, glancing at the girl, "Temari, do you have anything that belongs to Gaara?" Temari said, "Sure," and handed Naruto a forehead protector. Before Temari could notice him move, Naruto grabbed it and fled the room. Here, with the forehead protector in his hand, Naruto appeared in front of the 2 lions, and he looked at them, Temari said, not realizing that the boy had already left. The lion asked, "What can I do for you, Naruto-san?" "Can you follow this scent?" Naruto asked, placing the forehead protector in front of the tracking lion. They ran through the desert at full speed, Naruto in front of the group, and they could feel his chakra getting wilder and wilder as they went. "Yes," said the little lion, running toward the cave with Team 7 and Chio following him. They left the desert and entered the fire country, jumping from tree to tree, and Naruto's features began to change. His eyes were now blood red like the fox, and his whisker marks thickened. Aside from Kakashi, Chio jumped from tree to tree and asked, "Why is he trying so hard to save the cage?" "Because he considers Gaara like a brother and he don't like to see those he considers precious to him suffer. He's also like Gaara. He told me that they both had a tough childhood," said Kakashi as he gazed at the elderly woman. Knowing what the copy ninja was discussing, Chio asked, "Which one?" Looking ahead of himself, Kakashi uttered the words, "The 9-tailed fox." When they saw Pakun and Team Guy behind the small dog, they leapt down from a tree and began to walk. Shikamaru was looking bored, but he knew that his friend needed him now because he could see that Naruto was totally focused on the task at hand. Naruto approached Shikamaru and placed a hand on his shoulder. With the same expression, Naruto said, "Shika, Temari needs you right now." As Shikamaru ran in the direction of the village hidden in the desert, he said, "Sure, make sure you don't die." Naruto said, "Don't worry about it." Naruto looked at the cave in front of them and asked, "Is this it?" Inside the cave, 6 holographic figures were standing around a large statue inside the cave. Unremarkable and damp, the cave was a mere geographical blip that no one wanted to explore. It was vast, dark, and entirely underground, with stalactites and stalagmites chomping the void in silence. Despite its natural appearance, this cave actually had only one somewhat unique feature. In case of an emergency, the distinct seals covering this cave could serve as a focal point. Thus, the ideal location for Akatsuki to meet and exchange shade. Since they had already removed the 1-tailed raccoon spirit from his body, Gaara lay on the ground lifeless. After eliminating the 1-tailed beast from Gaara, the Akatsuki began discussing their next target when they sensed a presence outside the cave. The leader, a man with numerous piercings, said, "We have visitors, we are almost finished with the ceiling." His pupil had a ring-like pattern on them. A white-haired man with a weapon on his back said, "Who the fuck are they?" "It is Konoha ninjas, the Kyuubi's host is part of the group too," stated the leader. Under his puppet, Sasori said, "We'll take care of them." Deidara chuckled, "We get two-tailed beast in one day." The man with all the piercings stated, "But we haven't finished the sealing yet, we only have 90% of the sand spirit sealed." The man with all the facial piercings said, "We'll just have to go with 90%, the host is already dead, just make sure you bring him back with you so we can finish the sealing later." The man with the white hair remarked, "If Itachi and Kisame had remained with us, we would have completed." The man with all the piercings said, "Zetsu, you need to find those rings." The pierced man said, "I'll leave the Konoha team to you, Sasori and Deidara." "Yes, sir," Sasori said as everything vanished from view, leaving only Deidara, Sasori, and the dead body of Gaara on the ground. Beyond the cave, Naruto's lion led Team 7 and their temporary members Hinata and Shio as they leapt down on the lake in front of a large cave. Hinata was looking dejected because she knew of nothing that could soothe and calm Naruto at this moment, and he was looking as impatient as ever. They continued to greet the team in front of them as Team Guy arrived in front of the cave with Pakun in front of them. Tenten wore a long-sleeved Chinese style shirt with red pants and a large scroll on her back like Jiraiya, while Neji wore a white top that resembled a robe rather than a shinobi outfit. Guy and Lee were still wearing that awful green jumpsuit, but Lee now had a Chunin jacket on his jumpsuit like his sensei. Guy gave the man with the gravity-defying air the thumbs up and said, "Hey there, my eternal rival." With a glance at the Hyuga princess, Neji said, "Hello Hinata, Sama." Neji looked at the boy with the yellow hair and thought, Naruto. Hinata grinned and said, "Hello, Neji.ni.san. The entrance is protected by a seal," Kakashi stated, triggering his Sharingan eye. Kakashi looked at the Junin and said, "Neji, Hinata, it's a 5-point seal. Can you find the other 4? Lee shouted, "Hey Naruto," as he glanced at his comrade. "What's up, bushy brows?" Naruto asked, maintaining the same expression. Lee looked around and asked, "Where is Sakura-san?" Kakashi looked at the strange-looking boy and said, "She wasn't fit to participate in this mission." Neji and Hinata activated their dujutsu and began searching for the seals after saying, "Byakugan." Neji continued using his dujutsu to look and said, "One is on the side of the mountain." Each member of Team Guy went to one of the seals to prepare to remove them after they had located all of them. Kakashi declared, "Ready, pull them off in 3. Kakashi looked at the boy and said, "Naruto, get ready." After performing a few hand seals, Naruto uttered the words, "Gama Kachiyose no Jutsu." Toad summoning jutsu, called forth Gamatatsu, and prepared to smash through the stone that was sealing the cave. "Ready," Kakashi said. 1, Kakashi said. 2, was said, and Kakashi and Gamatsu began performing quick hand seals. 3, said Kakashi as he removed his seal, and everyone else followed suit. Gama Kanbi no Jutsu. Gausweden. Toad combination jutsu. Great water bullet. Was uttered by both Gamatatsu and Naruto as he placed his hand on his back. A large water ball emerged from the toad's mouth, shattering the large stone into numerous tiny fragments. After they all leapt into the cave, Naruto lost it when he saw Gaara lying on the ground, lifeless, and Deidara sitting on top of him. Sasori was just sitting there, completely bored. Chio thought, Sasori, as she observed the short Akatsuki member. When Naruto saw his friend on the ground, he yelled, "Gaara, G-A-A-R-R-R-R-R-R-R-A. Naruto glared at the attractive Akatsuki member and yelled, "Get the hell off Gaara, you jerk." "That's definitely the Jinchuriki," Deidara remarked, glancing at Sasori. "You know, he's been like this for a few hours," Deidara said, grinning briefly. Naruto pulled out a kunai and was ready to charge at Deidara when Kakashi appeared in front of him, holding him back. "Give Gaara back," he cried. Kakashi continued to stare at the Akatsuki members in front of him and said, "Naruto, calm down or you'll get us killed." "Come get him," Deidara said, drawing clay from his pouch and placing it in a mouth in his hand before tossing it into the air. When he sealed the clay ball in one hand, it transformed into a large white bird, which then took Gaara, placed him in its mouth, and stood there. Deidara grinned, "Come and get him," and then Naruto punched him in the stomach, sending him flying back to the cave's wall. As the bomb specialist stood up, a small amount of blood spurted from his mouth. Naruto continued to glare at the attractive man and was about to strike him once more when Deidara leapt on the bird, causing them to take off. Naruto immediately fled the cave after his friend. Kakashi ran toward the cave's entrance and yelled, "Naruto!" Kakashi jumped out of the cave and chased after Naruto, saying, "You guys take care of him, me and Naruto will take care of the other." When Deidara saw Naruto running out of the cave, he said, "He's following." The bird was just flying around in the air. In addition to the boy with the yellow hair, he noticed Kakashi sitting like a dog. I didn't anticipate his arrival either. As Kakashi of the Sharingan looked at them, Deidara thought. Through the headset he was wearing, Kakashi said, "Guy, they split up. We need backup, come back now." Guy said through the headset, "Kakashi, we got caught in the enemy's trap and we cannot go back now." Following the Akatsuki member who was atop the flying bird, Kakashi and Naruto began leaping from tree to tree. Naruto was leaping incredibly quickly in an attempt to reach the man who had abducted his brother. After removing the headband covering his eye and performing a series of hand seals, Kakashi closed his eyes and reopened them to reveal that his Sharingan eye had transformed into the Mangekyo Sharingan. "I will take care of him, Naruto," Kakashi said, glancing at the Akatsuki member. Naruto jumped on another tree and said, "Sure." The paths they were supposed to be following were destroyed when Deidara threw some small bombs on the trees, but the Konoha ninjas continued to pursue the attractive Akatsuki member. Kakashi began focusing his Sharingan eye on the Akatsuki member while he went through a series of hand seals. With Lee. In a flash, Lee and the other imposter Lee were gone, running at each other with the same kick. The force of their collision sent a shockwave through the air. Lee released his grip and launched a flurry of punches and kicks at his identical double, but the other Lee blocked it with his other hand and launched the same kick at Lee, which the taijutsu master blocked with the same hand. The identical double was doing the same thing, easily dodging and blocking the combos. Since Lee believed he would only ever see his sensei engage in equal combat in taijutsu, he was amazed by the Sai. "Guys, it looks like they are exactly like USA, they even possess our present abilities," Lee informed his fellow teammates over the radio. Tenten said over her radio, "Yeah, we worked that out." The fake Lee launched another powerful punch, which Lee dodged and countered with a fist of his own. Lee was grinning as his identical opponent threw a punch and a kick that he barely avoided. Lee never saw it coming as the identical double blocked the attack. The identical double kicked, and Lee followed suit, colliding with both of their blows. Both of them continued to block and dodge, as if they were now on equal footing. They persisted in launching punches and kicks with a velocity that some deemed inhuman. They continued to launch attack after attack without getting hurt or even tiring. After taking a step back to gain some separation, they charged forward with all of their might for the next attack. They both yelled, "Konoha Senpu! Leaf spinning wing!" as their legs collided, sending them both back a few yards. Lee kicked his opponent, saying, "Hey, I got a solution for this." Guy also threw a strong kick at his opponent, which the identical double blocked with the same kick. "What is it, Lee?" Guy asked. "You remember our motto for our training," Lee said, evading his opponent's combo. Tenten hurled another round of weapons at her double, asking, "What does that have to do with this?" Lee dodged an opponent's kick and said, "Remember what it said, right?" Guy kicked his opponent away, saying, "We were stronger than we were the day before." Lee kicked the other Lee away, saying, "These doubles have our current skills, all we have to do is get stronger." Getting back into the sand, Baki said, "The team is ready," glancing at Temari, who was strolling alongside the lethargic Chunin from the leaf. Shikamaru remarked, "It's such a drag, but Naruto is out there." One of Gaara's only students, a girl with her forehead protector around her neck, yelled, "Let's go rescue our Kazekage." Kankuro said, "Yes, let's go," as he left through the front door. Temari looked at the puppet user and asked, "Where do you think you're going?" "After my brother, where else?" Kankuro asked, continuing to walk. To save their Kazekage, all of the shinobi who weren't on village guard duty began to leave through the front entrance and head toward the fire country. Kankuro smiled because he knew that Gaara would still be a crazy killing machine and that not all of the shinobi from the sand would have come to his aid if Naruto had not fought him during the invasion of Sound and Sand. Kakashi and Naruto. With a yellow-haired boy chasing after him, Deidara was running for his life when Kakashi's Sharingan used jutsu that blew his other arm off his body. Deidara leapt from the large white bird he was riding, but before he could touch down, Naruto uttered the words, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Shadow Clone Jutsu." 5 clones then materialized behind him, leaping and capturing the bird before it could hit the ground. Kakashi attempted to stop Naruto from pursuing the yellow headed Akatsuki member, but he was too slow because the jutsu required a lot of chakra. Deidara was punched to the closest tree by Naruto after he caught up to him. Before passing through the next tree, Deidara was able to land on his feet after navigating through the first one. With a kunai between his jaws, Deidara ran toward Naruto because Kakashi was not yet near the yellow-headed boy. Naruto ducked and swept beneath the bombing expert as Deidara launched a kick at his head. Deidara jumped and avoided the leg sweep, but a clone appeared behind him and kicked him to the ground. Before shouting, "Rasengan!" Spiraling sphere, and striking the Akatsuki member in the chest with the chakra orb, Naruto leapt on the man and began punching him non-stop. He was furious when the man transformed into clay. Naruto's eyes changed, his nails became claws, his eyes began to leak chakra, forming a cloak around his body, and his mouth developed two fangs. Knowing that he needed to act quickly to prevent things from getting out of control, Kakashi pulled out a seal Jiraiya had given him and leapt in front of Naruto. "That was the Kyuubi, so it makes sense why he punched so hard," Deidara said from beneath the bush he was hiding in. Everything around Naruto was destroyed by his powerful punch. His clones were attempting to free Gaara from the clay bird when their faces began to burn. The red chakra surrounding Kakashi's body swiftly withdrew after he leapt in front of Naruto and placed the piece of paper on his forehead. As Deidara attempted to flee Naruto and Team Guy, Lee kicked him right away, sending him flying back. Neji then assumed his family's stance, preparing to cut off the man's chakra points, but the Akatsuki member managed to escape. With the clones carrying Gaara, Kakashi and a distraught Naruto arrived at the location where Team Guy was engaged in combat with Deidara. "Somewhere around here," Deidara thought, searching for something. "There it is," Deidara said, pointing to the clay bird's body he had been searching for. Deidara went to stand next to the bird, took a bite out of the clay, and began to chew it. Neji ran away and everyone else followed suit, saying, "We need to leave, his chakra is all going to one spot." As Guy ran alongside his students, he said, "We won't make it in time." Kakashi then activated his Mangekyo Sharingan. Before he exploded, Deidara exclaimed, "Art is a bang." Kakashi responded, "Kamui. God's Majesty," and the explosion stopped. Everyone exhaled with relief that they would no longer perish. Naruto grinned at his sensei before the Sharingan user passed out, but Naruto caught him. "What was that?" Lee inquired, grinning at his opponent. Naruto continued to hold his sensei as he remarked, "I saw him use this earlier, it has to do with the Sharingan." They all followed him as he made his way to the sand village after Naruto said, "Let's go," picking up his sensei as a clone carried his friend. As they arrived in the desert, they noticed Hinata and Shio moving in the same direction, toward the sand village. Since they couldn't see them, Naruto yelled, "Hinata, Shio. Sama." Hinata, whose clothes were filthy and she had numerous small cuts all over her body, said, "Hey Naruto-kun, are you okay?" Naruto grinned and said, "You guys beat that puppet guy." Then he noticed all of the shinobis from the sand surrounding them, and he lost it when he saw Kankuro. Hinata asked, glancing at the boy, "What about Gaara?" "Gaara is." Naruto uttered before his body was once more engulfed in red chakra. Kakashi attempted to stand up and stop him, but he was currently immobile. Screamed Naruto looking at the body of his friend, and he couldn't save his friend. Everyone looked in horror and sadness when Naruto jumped in the air with a tail of chakra around his body and landed on the ground, sending a shockwave of chakra around the sand. Shikamaru walked toward the boy and said, "What a drag, so that's why I'm here for." He then performed a few quick hand seals before saying, "Kagemain no Jutsu," Shadow Possession Jutsu, and his shadow connected with the boy's shadow, freezing the boy. The chakra swiftly vanished as Hinata approached the boy and gave him a look. "I'm sorry, Kankuro, Gaara," Naruto sobbed. As Chio approached the cage, blue chakra encircled her hand as she touched the cage. When Neji used his dujutsu, he saw what the elderly woman was doing. Hinata also saw what she was doing, and her expression was dejected. Shikamaru finally let Naruto go after he said, "You can heal Gaara," and he suddenly smiled. "Thanks, Shika," Naruto said as he approached the elderly woman. Shikamaru said, "No problem," as he sat on the sand. Naruto looked at the elderly woman and yelled, "What are you doing to Gaara?" Kankuro looked at the elderly woman and said, "Naruto, please calm down. She is giving her life to bring Gaara back." As the blue chakra dwindled, Chiyo remarked, I don't think I can do it, I don't have enough chakra left. Is there anything I can do to help? Could you use my chakra? Naruto asked hastily. Yes, place your hands over mine, Chiyo said, glancing at the boy. When Naruto placed his hands over hers, the blue instantly grew 20 times larger than it had been when Chiyo began the jutsu. Naruto was focused when he heard Gaara cough, and just as Chiyo was about to collapse to the ground, Hinata caught her with tears in her eyes. Gaara attempted to get up but was unable to do so because he felt his body was extremely rigid. Tamari said, don't try to move, as she approached her brother. Gazing around, Gaara said in a monotone, what is everyone doing here? They all came to rescue their cage, Naruto said, standing next to the cage and wearing a solemn expression. Gaara asked, glancing at Hinata, who was holding Chiyo's body, why is Chiyo-sama not awake? Kankuro looked at his younger brother and remarked, she sacrificed her life to bring you back. Gaara closed his eyes and bowed his head, saying, everyone, please pray for Chiyo-sama. Everyone followed suit, offering prayers for Chiyo's sacrifice. When they finally halted after a minute of prayer, Gaara attempted to stand up once more, but Naruto grabbed his arm and helped him up just in time to prevent him from falling to one knee. Before Kakashi finally spoke, they were standing side by side, gazing up at the sky. The seasoned ninja grinned at them and said, Chiyo sacrificed her life to bring you back, so she left the future in your and Naruto's hands. Yeah, Naruto replied, gazing up at the sky and recalling all the times he had spoken with his sensei Jiraiya. As the sand shinobis wrapped Chiyo's body in a black bag and began carrying her in the direction of the village hidden in the sand, Gaara uttered the words, let's return to the village. Alongside Deidara. When he sensed that the group was leaving their current location, Deidara emerged from his hiding place. He was furious because his partner had been killed by an elderly woman and a chunin. He saw a man wearing an orange mask in front of him as soon as he emerged from his hiding place, and since he was already feeling irritated, he did not want to deal with the boy at the moment. Looking at Deidara, the boy chuckled, Deidara, senpai, you look really beat up. Shut up, Toby, before I kill you, Deidara said, giving the boy a fierce look. Toby stepped a few feet away from the man and said, senpai, stop being so scary. When Kakashi attempted to suck him in the thing, Deidara asked, where is that arm? In a baby voice, Toby laughed and said, they took both your arms. Suddenly, he was on the ground and Deidara had put him in a headlock with his legs. Toby said, Deidara, senpai, you are killing me, before Deidara released him. Deidara picked up his left hand from the floor and said, there it is. They both set out for the cave where Sasori battled the Tokunoichi, and upon arriving there, they witnessed the devastation left by the conflict as well as the puppets scattered across the floor. Toby approached the puppet on the wall that held the Akatsuki ring and removed it. Deidara gazed at his deceased partner's puppet body and remarked, that's Master Sasori's true form, huh? Looking at the man's puppet body, Deidara remarked, it's unbelievable that an elderly woman and a chunin killed Master Sasori. Toby threw the ring into the air and declared, I can now finally join the Akatsuki. The cage is involved. When the group reached the front gate of the Sand Village, all of the shinobis who had returned to the village formed a line on either side of the entrance to give the cage space. Everyone was relieved to see their cage and delighted that he had survived. Gaara stopped and everyone behind him stopped when they reached the start of the lines. Let Chiyo-sama go first, Gaara said, stepping aside. While everyone else was praying for the elderly woman, the 6 individuals carrying Chiyo's body, among them Hinata, walked in front of the cage and began making their way toward the village gates. With Chiyo's body in tow, they entered the village. Her brother followed, and Gaara and Naruto trailed behind the elderly man, then everyone else. Everyone in the crowd began applauding the young cage as soon as Gaara entered, and Naruto smiled and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Jump in time. 1 week later, they were prepared to depart since it took Kakashi a full week to recover from his use of the Mangekyo Sharingan. While Naruto finished packing his belongings and preparing to leave for home, Gaara completed his check-up and was putting his shirt back on in the hospital. Already packed and prepared to go were Kakashi, Shikamaru, Lee, Guy, Neji, Tenten, and Hinata. Before he had to head back to the Hidden Leaf Village, Naruto hurried to the hospital to visit his friend. Naruto stood across from the boy who was leaving the hospital, grinning, and said, hey there, Gaara. Gaara looked at the boy in confusion and said, hey Naruto, what's with the smile? What did the doctors say to you? Naruto asked, grinning at the boy. They said that my body is back to normal, Gaara said, glancing at the boy with the yellow hair. Naruto laughed and said, so you are okay to battle, right? Sure, Gaara replied as he ran with Naruto in tow toward the village's gates. They chose to follow Kankuro and Temari after they ran past them because they knew something was happening wherever they went. Without understanding what or why they were following them, the entire Konoha team did just that. After reaching the village's gates, Naruto and Gaara ventured out into the desert, where they had previously trained with Jiraiya. Are you ready? Naruto asked, grinning at the boy. Yes, Gaara replied, leaping away from the boy. There were shinobis on either side of the village entrance who knew not to approach the fight too closely. One of the guards declared, the Kazekage is about to fight the Uzumaki boy, which caused everyone to find a spot to watch the fight. With Kankuro and Temari, all of the Konoha shinobis exclaimed, what? Gaara, stop this, Baki yelled as she approached the boy. Kankuro looked at the man and said, Sensei, leave them alone. They know what they're doing. While Gaara and Naruto stood grinning at one another, Naruto assumed the fox stance and Gaara assumed the sand stance. The first to attack was Gaara, who ran toward the yellow-headed boy with a speed that the onlookers were unaware of. He punched the boy with great force, but Naruto leapt into the air and performed 2 backward flips, landing on all fours like an animal. When Naruto reappeared in front of the red-headed boy, who was still on all fours and grinning, Gaara noticed him and prepared to fight back against whatever was coming at him. Naruto swept beneath the boy, causing the Kazekage to jump. Gaara kicked the boy while in the air, but Naruto blocked it with a kick of his own, reverting to his father's style instead of the fox's. Naruto and Gaara engaged in a kick-punch combo, attacking and dodging or blocking one another's blows for a good minute before coming to a halt. After taking a few blows, they both leapt away from his other, grinning. What the hell? Baki exclaimed, glancing at the 2 grinning boys. Kakashi put his book aside to observe the fight and remarked, it looks like they fought here before. As she performed a series of rapid hand seals, Gaara remarked, I guess we have to go to the next level, huh? After completing the hand seals, Gaara said to himself, Tsunation. Suna Shuriken. Sand style. Sand Shuriken. A wall of sand then rose up from the ground, and several shuriken began firing at the boy with the yellow head. After performing a few quick hand seals, Naruto said to himself, Fuden. Ranji K's no jutsu. Wind style. Wild wind jutsu. And then he extended his hand to send a strong blast of wind that easily deflected all of the incoming shurikens. Gaara performed some hand seals before he said, Tsunation. Suna no Heki. Sand style. Sand wall. And a sand wall rose up out of the ground in front of him before the strong gust of wind could reach him. The wind was stopped by the wall of sand, and Naruto ran toward the boy without anyone seeing. He appeared behind the Kazekage and struck him in the back with a strong punch before vanishing once more. Before the Kazekage could fall, Naruto kneed him in the stomach, sending the red-haired boy flying, and then punched him in the guts, causing blood to appear. Gaara got up from the ground grinning as Naruto punched the Kazekage once more, but the red-haired boy turned to sand. Shikamaru exclaimed, whoa, as she watched the 2 boys spar. Naruto.kun, Hinata thought as she watched the battle. Yash Naruto.kun, Lee exclaimed, grinning broadly. He simply vanished from view and resurfaced in front of the yellow-headed boy, who kicked him in the chest. Naruto skidded back, but he simply used his hands to get back up after running toward him at full speed. In midair, Naruto began performing some quick hand seals before he yelled, Fuden. Ranji K's no jutsu. Wind style. Wild wind jutsu. Then, he said to himself, Fuden. Mugen Sajin Daitopa. Wind style. Infinite dust grade breakthrough, and a strong gust of wind and sand struck him, sending the red-headed cage flying back. With a smile on his face, Gaara stood up and assumed his taijutsu stance across from the yellow-haired boy, who took his father's stance. Naruto balled up his fist and punched the kick away with another powerful blow after Gaara ran toward the yellow-headed boy and threw a powerful punch at him. The yellow-headed boy dodged Gaara's attempt to punch him in the face, and Kazekage, with the red hair, leapt into the air to avoid the oncoming blow. The audience, who were unaware that their Kazekage was that swift because he wasn't that fast during the Leaf Invasion, was astounded when they both launched a series of kicks and punches at a high speed. With lightning speed, Naruto and Gaara ducked and blocked each other's incoming attacks. Then, with a smile on his face, Naruto began to recall the times he had trained with Gaara in the desert alongside his sensei Jiraiya. He was recalling how, prior to training, Jiraiya had asked them to assess their fighting prowess. A flashback to Jiraiya's serious tone attracted their attention. Naruto, Gaara, I want you to answer a question for me as honestly as you can. I want you to evaluate yourself as a warrior and let me know what we need to improve on, Jiraiya stated gravely. Naruto considered this question while placing a hand behind his head. He concluded his analysis while awaiting his sensei's response. Well, Ero Sennin, I think that my taijutsu is solid, but I am definitely not on the level of someone like Lee. I think that I am horrible at genjutsu. I think that I have a few good jutsus, but I could always use some more diversity. Gaara paused for a moment before he began speaking. Well, I don't have any good taijutsu skill because I mostly use the sand in battle. I know only sand-based ninjutsu and I know a lot of them, so I'd say that my ninjutsu is okay. And finally, I don't have any speed because of the gourd and the fact that I don't do any speed training. I'd say I'm very slow. Jiraiya gave a nod. Naruto, I agree with what you said, and it is important for a great shinobi to honestly analyze inwardly to determine your weaknesses. Those ninja who cannot see past their strengths only ignore their weaknesses. Remember that you break a chain at its weakest link, so to improve your weaknesses makes you a stronger warrior. Naruto nodded, knowing that his sensei was correct. You too, Gaara, Jiraiya remarked, glancing at the boy. Jiraiya halted, located a rock close to the path, and took a seat. He gestured for Naruto to take a seat beside him. He wanted Naruto to focus on the explanation he was going to give. I think that you have learned some great techniques like Rasengan and Shadow Clones, but we definitely need to work on diversifying your techniques. I think we will need to explore improving your arsenal and also fully developing out all your techniques to the fullest expression. It is not enough to know a bunch of jutsu if you cannot creatively apply it. Your taijutsu is more of a brawler style, and we will need to explore how to refine it, so you can inflict more damage without having to take such a direct beating. In regards to your genjutsu, I am not going to be naive enough to believe that you will be able to cast them, but we have to make you an expert in detecting and dispelling them. Gaara, since I never seen you fight before, I'm going to take your word for it. You have a big sand-based jutsu arsenal, so we mostly going to work on your speed and taijutsu to make sure you don't rely on that sand so much in case you lose it one day, explained Jiraiya as he examined the child. End of flashback. Gaara was taken by surprise when Naruto delivered a strong kick to the young, red-haired Kazekage, sending him flying back. Before he said, Kaden, Karyu Enden, Fire Style, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet, a large fireball shaped like a dragon shot out of Gaara's mouth. Naruto knew how to counter that jutsu because Jiraiya had frequently used it against him during their spars. Gaara got up and looked at the boy performing some hand seals. After performing some quick hand seals while still in the air, Naruto launched a powerful blast of compressed wind bullet at the red-haired Kazekage, knocking him to the ground. He then said, Fuden, Renkuden, Wind Release, Drilling Air Bullet, after jumping into the air and performing a 360-degree horizontal spin. Kakashi and Baki nodded to one another in the crowd before saying, That's enough. Gaara, it looks like you've improved, Naruto said as he landed in front of the two Junin senseis. Gaara looked at the boy and said, You too, brother. Naruto grinned and rubbed the back of his head. As Kakashi looked at the boy grinning beneath his mask, he said, Naruto, we have to go. At the moment, I'm with the Konoha team. Since they wanted to talk a little about their mission and weren't in a rush to return to the village, the group was moving slowly toward Konoha. While Naruto was thrilled to have spent some time with Hinata during the mission, he was also eager to demonstrate to Sakura his strength during the training trip. Two other shinobis, Kakashi and Shikamaru, were walking carelessly because they did not have to run home, and they were currently enjoying the trip just as much as Guy and Lee, despite the fact that they had not yet spoken. Shikamaru was having fun because he thought it was tedious to run home when they weren't really needed, while the well-known copy ninja was simply savoring the new Icha Icha book that Naruto had brought him on his adventure. Lee knew exactly what he was doing as soon as he returned to the village, and both he and Guy were just happy to be a part of the mission and witness the yellow-headed boy in action. Lee yelled, Yash Naruto.kun, you really got strength, as he grinned broadly at the yellow-haired boy. While he was sweating profusely at the taijutsu master's antiques, Naruto said, Thanks, bushy brows, but do you have to be so loud? Lee cried out once more, Yes, I have to share my flames of youth, before he was left on the ground with Tenten staring at him. Tenten grinned as she looked at the girl and said, Hinata, I can't believe you fought against an S-rank ninja. Hinata looked at the girl with a flushed face and said, Shio. Sama did most of the work. Neji looked at the girl and asked, "Did you stand aside and watch?" "No," Hinata replied, glancing at the boy. Tenten said, grinning at the girl, "Then you fought an S-rank ninja." They were about a mile from the front gates of the village when Shikamaru said, "I'm so bored right now," while continuing to stare straight ahead. Lee looked at the boy and remarked, "I see the gates, Naruto-kun, you want to race me there?" Tenten gave the boy a menacing glare and said, "Lee, calm down, he doesn't want to race you." Naruto looked at the boy and said, "Yeah, bushy brows." He had sealed his backpack in a storage scroll, so he was not carrying any luggage. Tenten yelled, "Naruto, don't encourage him," giving the yellow-headed boy a menacing glare. Naruto looked at the girl and said, "Don't worry, Tenten." Naruto smirked as he looked at the boy and asked, "What do you say, full speed?" Lee looked at him, master, with 2 lines of water streaming down his eyes, and said, "Yash Guy Sensei, you want to enter the race and show our team's flames of youth." With the ocean and waves crashing behind them, Guy hugged the boy and said, "Yash, my student, you are always thinking of your team, so yes, I shall enter the race." This shocked everyone. Tenten glared at the boy with the yellow hair and said, "You see what you did, Naruto." "Remove the weights," Naruto said, glancing at the 2 taijutsu experts who appeared to be alike. Naruto turned to face the man reading the orange book and asked, "Do you want in Kakashi, sensei?" Kakashi pointed to the boy and said, "Huh, you said something?" "There you go with that too cool and hip attitude," Guy said, pointing to the man wearing a mask. "Are you interested in competing?" Naruto asked, glancing at the man. Kakashi looked at the boy and said, "No," before burying his face in the orange book once more. Looking at the Hyuga Junin, the yellow-headed boy said, "How about you, Neji?" "No," Neji said, merely glancing at the boy. "You're lost," Naruto said, removing the gravity seal he was wearing with a single hand. "Have you all taken off your weights?" Naruto inquired, glancing at them. Guy looked at the boy and said, "Yash, on 3, Naruto said, grinning as he glanced at the 2 taijutsu experts. Then Kakashi pulled his face out of the book and said, "Why don't we go back to the village to see who wins the race?" "Nice idea, my eternal rival," Guy said, endorsing the copy ninja. After a brief shunshin, Kakashi, Hinata, Tenten, Neji, and Shikamaru ended up in front of the village gates. Many other shinobis were waiting for them in front of the gates because they became concerned about the group after learning about the type of mission they were going on. Because they were missing teammates, Team 10 and Team 8 were unable to go on any missions. As a result, they took the final week off before they were prepared to resume missions. In addition to Sakura and their sensei, Ino, Choji, Kiba, and Shino were waiting for the group to arrive. Shizune was also there, ready to accompany them to the Hokage's office. Sakura was glaring daggers at the Hyuga princess, which made Hinata feel very small at the moment. Kakashi and the other members of the mission passed the village gates grinning gratefully. "Where is Naruto?" a fresh voice asked as he and an elderly woman approached the group. The elderly woman wore a white dress-like robe with the whirlpool symbol on the back, while the elderly man wore a dark orange robe with the same design. The elderly man knew that he was being followed and who was doing it, so 2 Anbu members were attempting to hide from him and the elderly woman who was pursuing them. Since he and his family had moved to the village, no one had seen the elderly man outside, so they all stared at him in disbelief. "Are you deaf or something?" I inquired. "Where is Naruto?" the elderly man repeated. "Kutame. Sama, Kushima. Sama, he's on his way here," Kakashi said, bowing before the 2 elders. "That's it," Kutame yelled, drawing his sword from its sheath. "Get down here and stop following me." All of the shinobi began to distance themselves from the 2 Uzumaki clan elders, but nothing changed. Jumping into the air, Kushima punched the tree the 2 Anbu members were in, shattering it into tiny fragments. Before they could fall with the trees, 2 Anbusa, one in a duck mask and the other in a rat mask, jumped down. The strength of the elderly woman in front of them made everyone perspire, and they had previously witnessed their Hokage exhibit such strength. "Remember what I told you about following us everywhere?" Kushima asked, glancing at the 2 Anbu participants. Moving a few paces away from the elderly woman, the man in the rat mask remarked, "We're your guards, we can't let you go anywhere alone." With the rat mask on, Kushima vanished and then resurfaced in front of the young Anbu, punching him hard in the stomach and sending him flying back to the wall, creating a crater in the wall. Just as she was about to approach him and start beating him up, Kutame said, "Calm down, Kushi-chan." With Naruto. "All right," I believe they're prepared, Naruto said, crouching down. With flames in his eyes, Lee yelled, Yash, let's go. Before they all took off, Naruto said, 1, 2, 3. Guy was in the lead, but he was not winning the race by much. Naruto and Lee were right behind him, running at the same speed but neither of them using any chakra to run faster. All that was visible was a large green blur in front and a yellow and green blur next to it. Even though they could only see green, yellow, and orange, everyone near the gates was staring at the race in front of them with wide eyes. The race was won by Guy, who arrived at the gates first. Naruto and Lee arrived at the gates simultaneously 10 seconds later. Lee was pleased that Naruto was able to stay with him because he did not want to be envious of his friend's growing strength. Lee noticed that Naruto was able to keep up with him the entire time, even without his weights on. Given that Lee was the fastest of the Konoha 12, everyone's eyes were wide open as they watched Naruto keep up with Lee, whose weights were off at the moment. Guy was particularly shocked by what had just transpired because Naruto had only taken 2.5 years to reach the same level of speed, whereas Lee had trained his entire life to attain that kind of speed. Guy gazed at the boy calmly and asked, what kind of training did Naruto-kun go through these past years? It's really amazing that Naruto-kun was able to keep up with my student without using weights. Congratulations, Guy said, his face streaming with tears. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and said, thank you, Fuzzy. Brows. Sensei. Lee was my inspiration, and I got faster. Kushima, who was outside the circle encircling Naruto and Lee, yelled, Naruto. No, he mentally screamed Naruto. Naruto recognized the person instantly, and he was currently in a panic, wondering what his options were. He could either walk toward them and receive a less severe beating for forgetting to visit his grandparents, or he could flee, but Kutame would catch him and beat him even worse for running. After witnessing what Kushima did to the Anbu who was meant to be protecting herself and Kutame, the group promptly dispersed from the boy. As he stood alone across from them, Naruto realized that nothing was going well for him at the moment. The yellow-haired boy approached the elderly woman and man slowly, knowing that they would not be forgiving of his failure to visit the Uzumaki compound since they had relocated to the village. As the elderly woman took the yellow-headed boy by the throat, everyone's eyes were wide open. Naruto was grinning in horror, while the woman had a charming smile. Naruto looked at the elderly woman and yelled, Ow! What did I do, Granny? You want to know what you did, Naru-kun? Kushima said, grinning and glancing at the boy with the yellow hair. Kushima twisted his ears once more and yelled, how about not coming to spend any time with us, going on a mission without telling us, and you did not even see us when you came back here. You were too busy showing off. As Kushima pulled Naruto by his ears, Kutame said, let's go. Help, Naruto muttered to himself. After putting his book away, Kakashi stepped up and said, Uzumaki. Sama, excuse me. What is it? It's Kushima, Kushima said, glancing at the man. Kakashi looked at her and said, Hitaki Kakashi. Kushima asked, glancing at the man whose face was hidden by a mask, what is it, Kakashi-san? With an upside down U in his eyes, Kakashi stated, we have to report our mission and Naruto has to be in the Hokage Tower with us. The woman grinned at the man and said, oh, why didn't you just say that, Naru-kun? I forgot, Naruto muttered, avoiding eye contact with his granny and focusing on his feet. Kushima released some killing intent on the boy and said, you better come to the compound after reporting the mission. Kutame looked at his wife and said, let's go, Kushi-chan. Naruto waved to the two retired shinobis who were leaving the group, and they waved back, see you later, Granny, Gramps. Kakashi walked toward the Hokage Tower, which stood in the center of the village, and said, okay, Naruto, let's go. While the rest of the group went about their daily activities, Naruto, Hinata, Sakura, Shikamaru, Guy, Neji, Lee, Tenten, and Shizune began making their way toward the Hokage Tower. When the group sensed that someone was following them, they stopped and turned around to see a normal-sized, dark brown lion with an unfamiliar-looking Hite-8 around its neck. The group had begun to walk toward the Hokage Tower, which was located in the center of the village. When Kakashi and Hinata saw Naruto call forth a lion on their way to the hidden sand village, they instantly recognized the sender. Naruto looked at the lion and said, hey Shio, what are you doing here? Shio looked at the boy and said, Kutame. Sama sent me to follow you to make sure you don't forget. Naruto turned to face the lion and said, oh, okay. Sakura looked at the normal-sized lion and exclaimed, "What the hell, they summon lions." Shio rolled her eyes at the pink-haired Chunin and asked, "What is your problem first time you see a summon?" With the lion trailing closely behind, they proceeded towards the Hokage Tower. Naruto was beaming broadly, relieved to be back in the village after 2 exhausting weeks on a rescue mission. Although Sakura was still upset with Hinata for preventing her from joining her team on that mission, Hinata was not concerned about her at the moment. In the Tower of the Hokage, with a deep sigh, Tsunade poured another cup of sake, drank it all at once, and then slammed the cup back onto her desk in disgust. Rising to her feet, she stepped out onto her balcony to watch the village as the sun sank. As she mentally reenacted the day's events, all she could do was shake her head in frustration. Now that Akatsuki was on the move, she was aware that Orochimaru would follow shortly, depending on whether or not they had heard of Itachi's fictitious death. The blonde Hokage was startled by a voice behind her as Tsunade turned around and returned to her desk, where she picked up the sake bottle again and started to pour another cup of her most prized elixir. Tsunade turned around and saw the teams she had dispatched to save Sakura and the cage of the sand standing in front of her. On the way to the tower, Shio stayed behind and was playing with a toy Naruto had given her. Before having to avoid a book that was thrown at him and struck Sakura, who was not focusing on the Hokage, Naruto grinned and waved at the legendary medical ninja, saying, "Hey there, Ba-chan." Kakashi placed an envelope on her desk and said, "Yo." She accepted the envelope and began reading the mission report that Hinata and Team 7 had completed. Throughout the entire report, she raised an eyebrow. Guy placed his envelope containing the Team 9 events on the desk after she had finished with Team 7's report. She read the entire report before setting both envelopes down on her desk. Although she was happy that the mission had been successful, she was now concerned for the yellow-headed boy's safety even though she knew he was capable of taking care of himself. Tsunade looked at the group in front of her and said, "You will have to come back later for your payments." All of the shinobis in the room nodded, with the exception of Naruto, who was distracted by his search for the location of Jiraiya's Hiraishin seal, which he had given him on his first day back. Tsunade stated, "Due to the dangerous nature of the mission, Naruto, Kakashi, and Hinata will get paid for an S-rank mission since they fought against S-rank criminals, and Team Guy and Shikamaru will be paid an A-rank mission since they were back up." A flashback. When Jiraiya and Naruto finally arrived at the gate, Jiraiya performed a few quick hand seals before saying, "Kachiyose no Jutsu." Summoning Jutsu. A puff of smoke appeared, and when it subsided, the 2 guards noticed Jiraiya performing what appeared to be a kabuki dance atop a medium-sized toad. Jiraiya finished in a final pose atop the toad. "I'm the man with enemies from west to east. I'm the one that men envy, women desire, and kids want to be. I'm the Toad Sage. Everyone watches in awe when I battle, the gallant of the world, respected and feared all around the world. Jiraiya said. Katetsu grinned and said, "Jiraiya Sama, you're back, and you have the Ghost of the Fourth with you." When Katetsu realized what he had said, he yelled, "Wait, you have the Ghost of the Fourth with?" Jiraiya grinned and said, "Yes, he has returned to exact revenge on the village for how they treated his son." Naruto began to chuckle at his sensei's humor. The other guard, looking scared, uttered, "The fourth never had a kid." Still smiling, Jiraiya said, "That's because he wanted it kept a secret." "No!" yelled Katetsu, looking like he's about to shit on himself. "I'm just playing with you," Jiraiya said, laughing alongside Naruto, who was also laughing uncontrollably. The other guard, who was observing Naruto, remarked, "That smile, the whisker marks, that's Naruto." Naruto put up the peace sign and said, "Hey, welcome back, dude," Katetsu chuckled. "Thanks," Naruto grinned. Naruto handed Jiraiya a seal and then walked down the streets, saying, "Arrow. Senin, I have to go see someone. Tell Ba-chan I'll be back. And put this somewhere in the office for me. Make sure Ba-chan doesn't see it." The end of the flashback. Naruto burst out laughing, recalling vividly his first day back in the village with his sensei. He was pleased to see the seal, but when he turned around, everyone was staring at him funny because no one else in the room could see it because it had been merged with the wall. Naruto said, "What?" as he turned to face the group. "What are you looking at?" Tsunade asked, raising her eyebrows slightly as she gazed at the boy. "Nothing, ha 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 ha," Naruto chuckled, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly once more. "Pay attention, you baka," Tsunade yelled, glancing at the boy. Tsunade cracked her knuckles and grinned, saying, I will get Jiraiya for rubbing his dumb.ass habits on you. Tsunade looked at the group in front of her and asked, so, is there anything else? The blonde Hokage was told by Hinata, yes, Tsunade. Sama, but I can return later. Tsunade smiled as she looked at the clan heiress and said, okay, then come see me tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Yes ma'am, Hinata said, smiling as she bowed to the Hokage. Is that it? Inquired Naruto, grinning, from the rear of the group. With an evil glee in his eyes, Tsunade asked, do you have somewhere more important to be? Naruto rubbed the back of his head and grinned, saying, actually, Gramps and Granny are waiting for me, and they'll kill me if I don't make it. Naruto said, Shio, let's go, as he approached the office window. From outside the office, the lion said, coming, Naruto, Sama. Tsunade raised her eyebrows slightly and asked, who's Shio? At that moment, a normal-sized lion sped past her and began to follow the yellow-headed boy toward the window. Before they began rapidly jumping from rooftop to rooftop, Naruto jumped out the window with the lion in tow, his coat floating behind him like a cape. Although Naruto was already anxious about visiting his grandparents, he was glad to be with family, something he didn't have much of as a child. Naruto used the lion summon to finally arrive at the Uzumaki compound, which, for some reason, was exactly like the one they were in back in the whirlpool, after 2 minutes of jumping from roof to roof. Naruto said, Granny, I'm here, as he entered the compound. From inside the main room, where they were at the moment, Kutame said, about time, boy. Following the voice, Naruto entered the main room where everyone was seated. After greeting everyone and being knocked to the ground by his younger cousins, he sat down next to his grandmother. Kutame and Kushima smiled as they observed the boy, pleased that he had such a good rapport with the children. What's up, Kenny.ni.san? Naruto asked, glancing at his uncle Kenji's son. Kenny glared at the boy and asked, why didn't you tell me that the academy was so boring? Naruto.ni.san. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and laughed, ha ha ha, you know, I had to go through it too. Kenny grinned and said, Iruka, sensei is always talking about you. Naruto continued to laugh at his young cousin and remarked, he is I guess I'm going to have to pay him a visit. Naruto looked at his grandmother gravely and said, Granny, I heard you guys got in some trouble when you came here. Kenji took a sip from the teacup in front of him and said, well, Naruto, let me tell you the beginning of the story. Rewind. Hello, Hokage. Sama, Kenji and his spouse bowed. Hello, Tsunade said to Uzumaki.san. After giving her the letter, Kenji took a seat where Tsunade indicated. The letter was opened by Tsunade. Tsunade addressed the elderly man and Kenji, saying, so, as the letter states, you will be living in the village. Yes, Hokage. Sama, Kenji replied. Tsunade looked at Kenji and asked, do any of you have ninja training? With a smile, Kenji turned to face his wife and replied, all of us, but some of the women are pregnant. Tsunade questioned, who will lead the clan? Kenji replied, that would be Kutame. Sama. Hell no, Kutame said as he stood up. With a vein on her forehead, Tsunade asked, and who are you? I am Kutame Uzumaki, the father of Kushina Uzumaki, Kutame declared with pride. Tsunade remarked, and why won't you lead the clan? Jiraiya.san told me that I would have to sit in a council made up of a bunch of stuck-up civilians and I won't do it. Kenji is the new leader, I'll be one of the clan's elders, Kutame said with a chuckle. Kenji and Tsunade thought to themselves, damn you, Jiraiya. And he'll fit in better than me because most of the clan heads are around his age, Kutame grinned. He got me, Kenji thought. Tsunade said, you got a point there. Tsunade grinned and thought, that's Naruto's grandfather, huh? Tsunade asked, and do you know the current rank of the ninjas? All of us high Junin level and Kutame. Sama Kage level, that's what Jiraiya.san said after he fought all of us. Kenji thought about it. Tsunade looked at the elderly man and remarked, Kage level huh? Kutame replied, yes, old lady. Tsunade stood up to beat the old man to the ground, but Shizune stopped her and gave her a childlike tongue. Suck. Shizune said, calm down, Lady Tsunade. You're actually Naruto's grandfather, Shizune told the elderly man. Tsunade glared at Kutame and looked at Kenji. You will not be able to get active duty since you were the head of the family, but the others except the wives and Kutame will be placed in the Anbu under me and the kids will be sent to the academy, she said. With laughter, Kutame questioned, why can't I be an active ninja? Tsunade glared at the elderly man and replied, because you're too old. Kutame looked at Tsunade and said, "You want to take this outside?" Tsunade was about to get away when Shizune put a hand on her shoulder and yelled, "Leave, old man." Shizune said, "Calm down, Lady Tsunade." "Calm down, Dad," Kenji yelled, glancing at the elderly man. Kutame laughed and remarked, "She started it." Shizune was told by Tsunade, "He started it." "Whatever," Kutame said, glancing at the most famous doctor in the world. Tsunade told the clan leader, Kenji-san, "Your wife and the other women will be active when I see them fit. Until then, rest. I will have someone guide you to your new home." "Dog," replied Tsunade. In front of the Hokage, a man in Anbu clothing with hair that defied gravity emerged in the office in a puff of white smoke on one knee. "Yes, Hokage. Sama," Kakashi replied. Tsunade addressed the slothful Anbu head, saying, "This is Naruto's family. Please take them to the compound that Kushina-san bought. You know where it is, right?" "Hi," Kakashi said. Tsunade added, "And please bring them to the council room later." Kakashi said to the man with the long orange-red hair and the woman with the long black hair, "Please follow me." They started walking toward the compound, which was adjacent to the Inuzuka compound, after following Kakashi out of the Hokage tower. They strolled past every store, some of which were closed. When they reached the compound, Kakashi left them there while holding the key. After opening the door and entering, they discovered a lovely garden in front of them. They strolled through the garden before entering the compound to take a nap before their later encounter with the Hokage. They settled in for the time being after cleaning the compound. End of flashback. "So Gramps got into it with Ba-chan," Naruto chuckled, tumbling to the ground. "Yes, they still don't get along," Kenji and his nephew chuckled. Gazing at the elderly man, Naruto chuckled, "It's unbelievable that Gramps aspired to be an active ninja." Bam Kutame slapped the yellow-headed boy over the head and yelled, "Shut up, brat." "I'm sorry, Gramps," Naruto said, rapidly shutting his mouth. Naruto looked at his uncle and asked, "Is that all that happened?" Kutame smirked as he looked at Kenji and said, "I got this." A flashback. Kenji and Kutame, who were conversing with the Anbu captain, returned with Kakashi and Tenzo. Kutame glanced around and noticed that everyone was staring at them. Tenzo and Kakashi simply went to stand behind the Hokage as they were supposed to. Tsunade smiled and said, "Cat, please make a chair for me for Uzumaki-san." Inoichi and Shikaku asked, "Did you say Uzumaki?" Tsunade looked at everyone and said, "Yes, we have a new council seat in the council for the Uzumakis." Choza remarked in surprise, "I thought that Naruto was the last Uzumaki." Tsunade grinned at Kenji and then glared at the elderly man, recalling earlier, Naruto and Jiraiya found them when they went to the whirlpool. The elderly advisor Homura remarked, "Didn't you think we needed to know about it before you let them in?" "No, not really," Tsunade replied plainly. "And why is that?" inquired Kaharu, the elderly woman. "Because, I didn't want to," Tsunade replied, glancing at the elderly woman, who was now furious. Homura glared at the blonde Hokage and asked, "Why?" Tsunade said, growing weary of their constant questioning, "Because the civilian side of the council doesn't have any say in shinobi business from now on." Homura stood up and said, "You can't do that. We have the power to do what we want. You have authority over matters pertaining to civilians," Tsunade yelled as she rose from her chair. "I'm still here, excuse me," Kutame said abruptly, interrupting the conversation. Tsunade pointed first at Kenji and then at Kutame, saying, "Oh yeah, everyone. This is Uzumaki Kenji, the head of the Uzumaki clan, and Uzumaki Kutame, Naruto's grandfather." A woman in her mid-20s with pink hair screamed, "Who cares about the little demon's clan?" In an instant, Kutame pulled out two swords, and Kenji got his sword to the woman's throat faster than anyone else in the room could have predicted. With two swords in his hands, Kutame approached the woman slowly after releasing a killing intent that had Tsunade and everyone else within 2 blocks of the council room on guard. Kutame said, "Can I kill her?" in a quiet but menacing tone. "No," Tsunade continued, standing in her place, "as much as I want to do it myself, Naruto wouldn't like that if he found out that someone was killed for him." Everyone returned to normal after Kutame stopped expressing his desire to kill. Kenji walked back to where he had been standing before putting his sword away. "Talk about my grandson like that again, and I'll punish you with your ugly head," Kutame said as he walked away. Before she excused herself from the meeting to go home, everyone could smell something coming from the woman. Sume laughed uncontrollably and yelled, "Did she just shit on herself?" "This is too good," Sume exclaimed once more, still giggling. Yeah, Shikaku replied. He was grinning. I already like you, Uzumaki, Tsume chuckled. Tsunade pointed to the Tenzo, made chair between Choza and Shikaku's seats and said, Kenji, please have a seat. When Kenji arrived and sat down, Shikaku raised his head slightly and gave the red-haired man a bored look, but now he grinned. After this meeting, we're going to a bar. Would you like to join us? Shikaku asked, grinning at the man. Sure, Kenji smiled, but we can't stay too late or my wife will have my head. Shikaku, looking bored, said, I was about to say the same thing. He had finally found someone who believed that their wife was a nuisance. I'm Nara Shikaku, by the way, Shikaku said, holding out his hand. Uzumaki Kenji, Kenji said, trembling his hand. Tsunade said, meeting dismissed, as she approached the chamber's entrance. Everyone stood up and started to head for the building's exit, with Kutame leaving first. Before they had to leave for home, everyone went to a bar outside the building to have some fun, for himself, his father, and his new friends. Kenji ordered a bunch of drinks. After they all got wasted, they prepared to head home. Due to their desire to explore the village, Kenji and Kutame were walking home while intoxicated. As they approached their house, Kutame and Kenji both felt people outside, but they pretended not to be aware of the presence of the shinobis. When Kutame began performing some hand seals, Kenji grinned before he pulled out his sword and uttered the words, Uzumaki Hajutsu. Uzu no Kuni Taju Kantana. Uzumaki secret technique. Multiple swords of the whirlpool. He then pointed his swords at the incoming root members, and as they did so, they multiplied into a bunch of handleless swords that shot toward them, killing them all before the duplicates vanished like a shadow clone. In order to report to his master, the leader hastily left the two lethal Uzumakis. In order for people to see the bodies the following day, Kutame left them on the ground with all of the sword holes in them. The end of the flashback. Even though he was sweltering on the inside, Naruto asked his grandfather calmly, did you guys ever find out who sent them? While maintaining a composed exterior, Naruto's innermost desire was to identify the perpetrator of the village attack on his family. The boy with the yellow hair was aware that he did not want to lose the only true family he had ever known. He was both relieved that nothing happened to his family and incensed that they had been attacked as soon as they arrived in the village. When Kunin entered the room carrying some food and Kyoki followed closely behind with more food, Naruto was contentedly laughing and talking with his family. Naruto had an idea as soon as they put the food down. He wanted everyone to join them for a meal, and he knew how to make that happen. Before applying the blood to his right hand and saying, Gama Kachiyose no Jutsu. Toad summoning jutsu. Naruto bit his thumb and performed a series of hand seals. When the young toad was small, he called forth a small toad that was as large as Gamakichi. Looking at the future toad sage, the small toad said, Hello Naruto. Sama, what can I do for you? Naruto smiled as he looked at the small toad and asked, Can you find Ero Sennin for me and tell him to come to the Uzumaki compound Gamao? The small toad swiftly vanished in a cloud of smoke and proceeded to locate Jiraiya for his pupil. Why are you sending for Jiraiya? Kutame inquired, casting a suspicious glance at the boy. Naruto grinned and said, We're having a family dinner. Kutame hurriedly got up and fled the room, saying, Why didn't you just say that? Let me go find some sake. A small little lion appeared in front of him with a whirlpool hite.8 around his neck after Naruto wiped blood off his hand once more, this time on his left hand. He then went through the same hand seals but finished with a different seal before saying, Shikachiyose no Jutsu. Lion summoning jutsu, and slamming his hand on the ground. What can I do for you, Naruto? Sama? The little lion asked, glancing at the boy with the yellow head. Naruto grinned as he looked at the tiny lion and said, Yes, Shin, could you go find Itachi and Kisame and tell them to come here? Following Itachi's scent, the small lion fled the room and leapt over the compound's gate, heading toward the Namikaze compound. Here at the Namikaze compound, sitting atop a tree, Itachi gazed out over the lake behind the Namikaze compound, which was reminiscent of the lake behind the Uchiha compound, but he was ignoring the memories. His soft face was exposed because he was not wearing his mask, and his hair was blowing in the wind. He was dressed in black cargo pants similar to Naruto's, and the Anbu top he wore underneath his Akatsuki coat was still on. Itachi had a black crow on his shoulder and a short Anbu katana strapped to his back. He hasn't really left his mask on since returning to the village. Only a select few Anbu members and Kakashi were aware of his return, and the Hokage was also aware of it. He was happy to return to the village for which he would sacrifice his life, the village for which he killed his entire family and for which he made his younger brother despise him, and he was aware that he would repeat the entire ordeal in order to protect the village. Itachi felt something moving toward the compound, so he got up, put on his mask, and leapt from the top of the tree. To get him to go meet Naruto, the little lion leapt over the large compound's entrance and charged at full speed toward the Uchiha prerogative. Looking at the man in the mask, the little lion said, "Hello, Itachi-san. Naruto. Sama sent me to tell you and Kisame-san to go to the Uzumaki compound." The young Uchiha bowed before the small lion and said, "Thank you, I'll get Kisame, you can dismiss." The young Uchiha was left behind when the little lion vanished in a cloud of smoke, and Itachi began walking in the direction of the house where Kisame was currently sleeping. Kisame was still in his nap when Itachi knocked on the door. Not wanting to waste any more time, Itachi kicked in the door, but as soon as he did, he leapt back, avoiding 3 kunai that were flying at him. The young Uchiha prodigy was standing in the doorway, staring at Kisame when he finally sat up from the couch he was sleeping on. Kisame looked at the boy who was massaging his eyes and asked, "What do you want, Itachi?" Itachi declared right away, heading back toward the compound's entrance, "We're going to the Uzumaki compound." Kisame appeared next to the young Uchiha and said, "Wait up." Similar to Itachi, Kisame wore the Konoha Anbu outfit, but he lacked the tattoo on his right arm that all the other Anbus had. Wearing their masks, they headed toward the Namikaze compound's entrance. As soon as they reached the front of the compound, they both leapt to their feet and began jumping from roof to roof in the direction of the Uzumaki compound. In a dark cave somewhere else, 7 holographic figures were standing in a circle in a pitch black cavern close to the hidden mist village's edge. The faintest outline of anything was all that anyone could see in the near black darkness. Only their eyes and the tiniest details of their attire were noticeable. Despite their disparate sizes and shapes, the group shared one characteristic. They wore black cloaks with red clouds. Partly light and part dark, Zetsu, a man with what appeared to be the jaws of a Venus flytrap around his head, started to add, "There's been interesting happenings in Konoha. Interesting events indeed." "Explain," demanded the figure of a man with many piercings on his face and eyes ringed in lilac, who appeared to be formed of the shadows themselves. "It seems that Uchiha Itachi and Hoshigaki Kisame are currently in the village. I found the rings, that they found a way to take off back in the old Whirlpool country," explained Zetsu as he examined the individual. A man brandishing a massive scythe strapped to his back yelled, "The fucking bastards betrayed us." "Calm down, Hidan. I want Tobi to go and bring back Kisame. Kisame is needed for our plans," the man with the lilac ringed eyes said, avoiding the man's direction. In a little boy's voice, a tall man in the circle remarked, "Tobi is a good boy." Zetsu turned to face the man with the lilac ringed eyes and said, "What about Itachi?" With a stern expression on his face, the man replied, "We already have the Sharingan, so we don't need him anymore." "Zetsu, you will accompany Tobi and return Kisame here," the leader said before they all vanished. Zetsu's head was visible, but the rest of his body was buried in the ground when they were in their true bodies. Tobi, on the other hand, was standing up, a Sharingan eye peeking through the entire mask. Zetsu's expression was devoid of emotion, and Tobi's mask prevented anyone from truly understanding his thoughts. With a childish whiny voice, Tobi moaned, "Are we going to Konoha, Zetsu?" as she looked down at the man. In a deep voice, the man with the dark side of the Venus flytrap replied, "Of course we are, Tobi." The light part of the conversation began with, "Not yet." Back in the village of Hidden Leaf, everyone was already in the Uzumaki compound. Kisame was stuffing his face with food. Naruto was talking to his grandparents and they were both grinning. Itachi and Kyoki were smiling, and Jiraiya was writing in his notepad in the corner. At that point, Kutame called for everyone to join him for dinner, but he failed to notice Kisame already stuffing his face around the table. They conversed and laughed with one another while seated around the table. Itachi looked at the boy and said, "Naruto, why do you want to be the Hokage of this village?" Well, first I wanted to be Hokage to be recognized and acknowledged by the villagers of the village as a hero and not just a demon like they saw me. Then when I met Team 7 and Kakashi Sensei, I learned that only when you fight to protect something precious to you will you truly become strong. I want to be the Hokage now because I want to protect everyone who believed in me and get the villagers to have faith in me, and for that I would give my life anytime," Naruto said with a broad grin and a head rub. Jiraiya looked at the empty room and laughed, "Good answer, Naruto. I remember when I was chosen to be Hokage of the village." "Wait, what? You were selected to be the Hokage?" Naruto questioned, his eyes wide and his mouth hanging. Yes, Sarutobi. Sensei selected me to be the 4th Hokage, and I was also selected to be the 5th Hokage 3 years ago, Jiraiya replied, grinning as he turned to face his apprentice. With a glance at the man, Itachi questioned, then Jiraiya. Sama, why are you not the Hokage? Naruto muttered, they probably realized he was a pervert, just before the Toad Sage, who was staring at him, struck him in the head. I heard that brat. Now for your question, Itachi. The first time I refused the position because I wanted to travel the world after I finished training Minato. I didn't want to stay in the village because I had to run my spy network outside the village and Minato had already surpassed me, so I nominated him instead. So then after I nominated him, the choice for the Hokage position was between my student and my teammate Orochimaru. Sarutobi sensei always saw Orochimaru as kind of like a son, so he was the first choice after myself, but when the old man found out that he was doing experiment on the villagers, the position was given to Minato and Orochimaru deserted the village. Orochimaru wanted to be Hokage, so he grew a profound grudge against the village for choosing Minato over him. Jiraiya began to think deeply. Jiraiya began, grinning, I didn't like Sarutobi sensei at all when I first met him. Jiraiya as a child in the past. In the academy, Jiraiya was seated in the rear of the room, observing a blonde girl seated next to a boy with pale skin. Until it was time for them to leave, the boy continued to stare at the girl. After leaving the academy, Jiraiya went to finish her day's research. Jiraiya strolled to the closest hot spring and climbed a nearby tree to observe the girls taking a bath. Jiraiya made the decision to head home since it was getting late. Jiraiya saw Tsunade walking home while he was on his way home and approached her, blushing and scratching the back of his head. Jiraiya muttered, Tsunade. Hime, as she observed the girl's blushing face. Looking at him, Tsunade yelled, what baka? Jiraiya smiled at her and blushed as he said, I was wondering if you wanted to go on a date with me? Tsunade screamed, hell no baka, and punched him back to the closest wall. Jiraiya was left on the ground with a broken nose after Tsunade left him. In preparation for the upcoming exam the following day, Jiraiya got up and went home to rest. Jiraiya got up the following day and went to the academy to take the test. The class took the test, and even though Jiraiya passed, he finished last. Orochimaru, a boy with pale skin, won Rookie of the Year, and Tsunade, the class's top female, finished first. As the instructor distributed the teams, the class sat down. The instructor said, okay, Team 7 will be Jiraiya, Tsunade Senju, and Orochimaru, which made Tsunade both pleased and angry. She was ecstatic that Orochimaru was on her team and furious that Jiraiya was as well. After examining each one, the instructor declared, your Junin instructor will be Sarutobi Hiruzen. When Sarutobi entered the room, he instructed Team 7 to follow him up to the roof. The three sat down after him. Let's introduce ourselves first, Sarutobi said, glancing at the group in front of him. My name is Sarutobi Hiruzen. I like the village, my wife, and training. I dislikes people who thinks they're better than others and put others down. My dream is to become the Hokage, said Sarutobi with a grin. You next, Hiruzen said, gesturing to Orochimaru, who was seated. Orochimaru stated without showing any emotion, my name is Orochimaru. I enjoy ninjutsus and training, and my dream is to master every ninjutsu in the world. He has issues, Jiraiya said. You next, Sarutobi said, gesturing to Tsunade. Looking at Orochimaru, who didn't even look at her, Tsunade Senju said, my name is Tsunade Senju, and I like Orochimaru in my village, and training, and my dream is to be the best medic nin in the world. Sarutobi pointed to Jiraiya and said, you. My name is Jiraiya, I like Tsunade. Hime and training, I dislikes people who put others down, and my hobbies are doing research. My dream is to one day travel the world, laughed Jiraiya. As he vanished in a cloud of smoke, leaving the Genins behind, Sarutobi Hiruzen said, okay, meet me tomorrow at Training Ground 7 to take your Genin test and don't eat breakfast because you might throw up. The three headed for the streets and began their journey home. Tsunade fled when Orochimaru called to him. Orochimaru pivoted and gazed impatiently at Tsunade. Tsunade, flushed, said, Orochimaru.kun. Would you like to go on a date with me? Orochimaru said, no, as he turned to leave without showing any emotion. Breathing heavily, Jiraiya ran up and caught up to Tsunade. Jiraiya scratched the back of his head and said, Hime, don't worry about the Teme, you're the prettiest girl around. Jiraiya smiled and flushed as she asked, since we're teammates and everything, would you like to go out so we can get to know each other better? Tsunade screamed, "Hell no Baka," and punched him in the head. Jiraiya was left on the ground with 2 broken ribs after Tsunade left. After getting himself up, Jiraiya went to the hospital to be examined. Jiraiya left the hospital after receiving treatment and returned home. For their Genin exam, the team reported to Training Ground 7 the following day. After explaining the test, Sarutobi instructed them to start. Jiraiya failed every time he tried to get a bell and was caught in every trap Sarutobi set. When the allotted time had passed, Jiraiya was bound to the Training Ground's tree stump, and Orochimaru and Tsunade each held a bell. Jiraiya was still bound to the tree when Sarutobi ordered the others to return home. Sarutobi said gravely, "Jiraiya, where are you going that prevents you from training?" "Doing research," Jiraiya said with a smile. With trepidation, Sarutobi remarked, "Perhaps we should conduct that research together someday." Jiraiya laughed and said, "Oh Sarutobi, sensei, you're a pervert." "Whatever," Sarutobi said. Jiraiya was released by Sarutobi, who then took him to get some ramen. After eating, Jiraiya prepared to depart. "Remember tomorrow's training session," Sarutobi said with a smile. "Okay sensei," Jiraiya said as he ran home. Instead of heading straight home, Jiraiya went to the hot spring and began to peek through a small opening in the fence wall. Blood was streaming from Jiraiya's nose as he giggled. Jiraiya remained at the hot spring until every woman had gone. After that, Jiraiya went home to sleep. When Jiraiya returned to the training area the following day, he discovered that the team had already begun the session without him. As Sarutobi trained Tsunade and Orochimaru for the day, Jiraiya simply sat in the tree and observed. Since he was only 10 minutes late, they began the training session without him, which really infuriated Jiraiya. Instead of acting in his typical hyperactive manner, Jiraiya leapt from the tree and approached the team. Because Orochimaru was his favorite student, Sarutobi didn't want to stop training him when he saw Jiraiya approaching, so he threw him a scroll that contained the Shadow Clone Jutsu. After accepting the scroll, Jiraiya turned to leave. Sarutobi asked, glancing at the boy as he left, "Where are you going, Jiraiya?" Jiraiya stated without turning around, "To find some other teacher to help me duh." Sarutobi objected, glancing at the boy as he left him, "What about me? You only train Orochimaru, Teme and Tsunade." So you think I'm dumb," Jiraiya said, continuing to walk. Jiraiya simply went to a different training facility and began practicing the jutsu by herself. He spent hours trying, but he was unable to master the jutsu. Jiraiya kept trying because he wouldn't stop until he got it right. After trying until he got it right, Jiraiya returned to the training area, handed Sarutobi the scroll, and left the team. Flashback end. The Toad Sage's talk about his early years was listened to by everyone in the room, and for Naruto, who has been with Jiraiya for a while, it was the first time the man had ever discussed his past. Jiraiya actually disliked discussing his past because it brought to mind all of his past transgressions. After listening to his sensei, Naruto realized that the story sounded identical to his Genin team. Wait. Ha 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 ba. Chan liked Orochimaru. Teme? Naruto chuckled as he glanced at his sensei. Jiraiya looked at the boy and laughed, "Yeah, ha 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 ha. And Orochi. Teme didn't even like her, that idiot." Naruto remarked, laughing, "Bah. Chan sounds just like Sakura when we started as Genins," recalling his encounters with the pink-haired medic. Jiraiya looked at the boy and laughed, "Ha ha ha ha. She was like that for a long time, Gaki." One time. Jiraiya began, glancing at the boy. This is a flashback to Jiraiya's earlier years. The 12-year-old Jiraiya grinned as he thought that today would be the day he asked his longtime crush, Tsunade, out on a date. Tsunade was utterly ignoring him and only paying attention to her crush, the pale teen Orochimaru. Sarutobi smiled as he looked at his team and lost sight of the distant Hokage Tower. With those words, the young Sarutobi walked off toward the Hokage Tower. "All right, everyone, good job today. I am going to report to Hokage Sama. You all did a good job. You all deserve a rest. We'll meet up later." Tsunade muttered, "Well, everyone except for Jiraiya." Baka, loud enough for Jiraiya to hear, and when she said that, he started to perspire. Tsunade couldn't let him go without asking him out, so Orochimaru left his 2 teammates to walk to another place in the village without saying a word. She went to him unexpectedly without making eye contact because she was adamant that she would ask him out today, no matter what. "What do you want, Tsunade?" the Genin Orochimaru inquired. After blushing a little, the teenager Tsunade turned to face him and asked, "Orochimaru, would you like to go out with me?" He quickly replied, "No," and walked away. Tsunade let out a sigh of disappointment because she had assumed he would say no. She always knew he didn't care about her appearance, although she was completely mistaken because, at least in Jiraiya's opinion, she was one of the most attractive girls in the village. Jiraiya grinned at the scene because he knew Orochimaru would reject her offer. Now that he had the chance to ask her out, he approached her but was met with a death glare from the blonde, who was clearly upset that Orochimaru had rejected her. She asked in a chilly, hostile tone, "What do you want, idiot?" It was clear that she was upset. Tsunade. I was thinking if you will like to go out with me, Jiraiya said, blushing a little as he gave her a silly smile and scratched the back of his head. Tsunade, on the other hand, yelled, "No, you idiot, who the hell do you think you are to come and ask me out? The answer is no. Get this on your head, Jiraiya, I will never go out with you even if you were the last boy on the planet." But Tsunade. Come on, it will be fun, you know that Orochimaru will never accept to have a date with you, so why bother with someone like him? Wham! As she marched up to him and grabbed his collar to make sure he was looking at her directly, Tsunade punched him in the face, sending him a few feet away and landing him hard on the ground. Jiraiya, I'd rather die than go out with someone like you. Orochimaru is worth my time because he's good looking, cool and talented. You on the other hand, you don't have any of those qualities, so you're not worth my time, she said. Tsunade left after saying those icy words, oblivious to the fact that she had seriously injured her teammate, who was bleeding and suffering from a broken nose. Had she lingered a bit longer, she would have witnessed Jiraiya's heartbroken expression, tears streaming from his eyes. That day, Jiraiya made the decision that since Tsunade didn't like him, he would no longer pursue her. She wants strong, so I'll give it to her, Jiraiya moaned as he lay on the ground, his body covered in bruises. End of flashback. Jiraiya concluded with a smile, that's when I started taking my training seriously, and started getting stronger every day. Jiraiya sat back and looked at nothing in particular, wondering if there was anything he could change in his life at this moment. In any case, he was a wealthy and well-respected Ritara, at least among men. He trained Namikaze Minato, who became one of the most feared shinobi in the Third Great Shinobi War and the youngest and strongest of the 5 Kages of the Hidden Leaf. Despite his constant desire for a son, he never married and didn't have the time to have one because of his frequent travels. When he arrived too late to assist Minato with the Kyuubi, he was devastated because he thought of and treated Minato like his own son. He couldn't help but smile when he saw Naruto, the boy he regarded as a grandson, because the boy looked a lot like his father, Namikaze Minato. He taught Naruto ninja techniques, and he knows that one day the boy will outskill him and eventually outskill his father. Naruto looked at the man in front of him gravely and said, "I don't want to bring this up, but I would like to know why you hate war so much that you were willing to sacrifice your family and happiness to stop it from happening." He knew it would be difficult to discuss the family and that you killed yourself, so he didn't want to bring up Itachi's past. "It happened when I was a child. 2 years after I graduated from the academy I was already a chunin. When I was 8 I fought in the Third Great Ninja War along with the forces of the Uchiha clan. We were to send protection to a nearby village in the Fire Country because it was being attacked by stone ninjas. They needed to pass through the village in order to get to Konoha. Other forces were already providing backup to the main battalion while others left to destroy the Kanabi Bridge. However, one of the things I have learned from war is that good things never happen in your favor." Itachi began with a stoic expression on his face. Flashback. The history of Itachi. Itachi, 8, was running through the deserted streets of the partially demolished village. To offer defense against the enemy forces of the Hidden Stone Village, they have come a bit too late. Like many Konoha ninjas, the young Uchiha had his leaf Hite 8 on his forehead. He was dressed in a black shirt, black cargo pants, blue ninja sandals, and a blue jacket with the Uchiha clan's crest on the back. He had a katana strapped to his back, a shuriken pouch on his right leg, and a kunai pouch on his left back side. In order to better protect himself, his father Fugaku taught him how to wield a sword, and within a few months, he had perfected the technique. The young Uchiha was not having a good day. In fact, he was finding things more difficult. His father ordered him to separate from his team, but he hasn't seen them in a long time. He has only used his camouflage jutsu to kill 2 stone ninjas who were hiding. However, the Sharingan was able to quickly identify them, so they were unable to hide. His worst fear was that the remaining stone ninjas would ambush the remaining members of the Uchiha squadron. Since the Uchiha were the most skilled ninjas in the Hidden Leaf Village, he had faith in them, but if that was the reason, he had to retreat and locate them. He heard the sound of metal clashing as he ran through the village's destroyed streets. It was the sound of shurikens and kunais colliding. Now that he was running in the direction of the sound, He quickened his pace. He reached a sizable clearing in the village where numerous homes had been destroyed and others were still blazing from the fires started by the stone ninjas. He saw a familiar figure, a young boy about his own age, with untidy dark hair and a leaf headband strapped to his forehead. He was dressed similarly, too. When Itachi saw that his best friend was struggling with a couple of stone ninjas, he recognized him. He continued to use his own kunai to deflect kunais. In order to find the stone ninjas who were employing the camouflage jutsu, Itachi charged him with his Sharingan. He shouted, "Shisui, get back," to the young Uchiha. As Itachi activated his Sharingan and performed a series of hand seals, Shisui stepped back and whispered to himself, "Kaden. Housenka no Jutsu. Fire style. Mythical Fire Phoenix Jutsu," as several tiny balls of fire shot out of his mouth in the direction of the hidden stone ninjas. The dozens of tiny fireballs burned the stone ninjas who were hiding before they began to scream in pain and, soon after, their bodies were reduced to ashes. After halting the jutsu, Itachi exclaimed, "Shisui, are you okay?" Shisui looked at his cousin and rival and remarked, "I am glad you came, Itachi. I was having a hard time against those ninjas." With a glance at the boy, Itachi questioned, "What happened? Where did everyone go?" "I got separated from the group. Stone ninjas came and used an earthquake jutsu separating me from the rest, and I've been trying to find them ever since," replied Shisui as he looked at the child. Looking at his cousin, Itachi remarked, "We'll look for them together. Perhaps they've already helped the civilians escape." With a hint of jealousy for his friend, Shisui remarked, "Yeah, and you handle those stone ninjas well." "You handle yourself well too, Shisui," Itachi's grinned. Shisui put his head down and said, "No, I didn't compare to you. You already unlocked your Sharingan, and I haven't yet. After all, you're my rival," Itachi said in an attempt to console his friend. Shisui laughed. "Yeah, someday I will unlock my Sharingan and then I will beat you bad." The young Uchiha grinned and said, "In your dreams. Someday I will." Shisui smiled. Itachi and Shisui have been searching for the rest of their comrades for a long time in the wasteland looking village. They soon arrived at the location of the former main village district. The entire burned-out district was filled with dead bodies, and they both gasped in horror at what they were witnessing. Itachi was completely shocked to see hundreds of the villagers' dead bodies. Itachi was genuinely appalled at that moment because there was blood all over the place, enough to create a sea of blood. When he saw the dead bodies of men, women, children, and even infants, his Sharingan eyes widened. At this point, the agonizing reality struck him hard. This is how innocent lives were entangled in the conflict. Due to a conflict that the hidden villages were having, a great number of people died. Their goals and aspirations have resulted in the spilling of innocent blood. Now that he was aware of the harsh reality of war, tears were streaming down his face. Shisui was horrified and shocked as well. It was too painful to witness. He learned in the academy that death was inevitable for ninjas, just like Itachi, but they weren't prepared to see this. Even though they were only 8 years old, they had already seen more blood and dead bodies than the average child could. The startled Shisui questioned, "Wada? What's going on? Why are there so many civilians here?" "Don't tell me," Itachi said quietly as he started to cry. "I thought our group would have evacuated all of them and helped them escape the village." "Wait," Itachi said, glaring and reaching for his katana. "What's wrong?" Shisui inquired while consuming a few kunais. "Enemies." Itachi continued to use his Sharingan to glare at the attacker's location. "More stone ninjas? How many?" "There's 3 of them, let's be careful, look out." Itachi and Shisui leapt in time to avoid the enormous earthquake that destroyed half of the ground in Earth-style earthquake palm strike, but they landed in different places and split apart in the process. Near Shisui's location, Itachi spotted 2 stone ninjas hiding with their camouflage jutsu. "Shisui, watch out, they're close to you," Itachi said. The young Uchiha responded by using his kunai to block a few shurikens. The stone ninjas teamed him as they charged at him, letting go of their jutsu. Shisui dodged a kick from the other stone ninja and blocked a punch. With lightning speed, Shisui stabbed one of them in the abdomen with his kunai, causing him to drop to the ground. But the second stone ninja gave him a hard punch to the face. "You little bastard," he yelled as he struck Shisui once more, causing him to cough up blood. The stone ninja with the abdominal injury exclaimed, "No wait, this son of a bitch is mine. I'm going to enjoy beating you up, you little shit." When Itachi saw his best friend in trouble, he yelled, "No Shisui, I have to do something." The stone ninja said, "Doden. Iwaru no Jutsu. Earth style. Rock prison jutsu." After performing a few hand seals, Itachi was able to quickly avoid the approaching Earth Pillar's prison by using his Sharingan. He landed next to the stone ninja and unsheathed his katana. "You're faster than I anticipated for a brat," the stone ninja said, smiling and meeting his eyes. Itachi said, "Let Shisui go or you will die," in a chilly, poisonous voice. "I'm afraid I can't do that," the stone ninja said. On the opposite side, Itachi witnessed the two stone ninjas beating Shisui. The alleged leader of the stone ninjas said, "That's enough, we can't overdo it, remember we need him alive." "Yeah, we need to get all the information we can get from this brata. No, they are going to torture him to extract information from him. I have to stop them," Itachi said, reading their lips with his Sharingan because they were too far away. Itachi heard a faint cry just as he was ready to go out and assist his best friend. He was holding a girl who appeared to be around 5 years old and was clearly crying a lot when he gasped as he looked at the stone ninja in front of him. "Look what I found, this little girl seems to be lost on her way, she must have been separated from her family, or perhaps they're gone already," said the stone ninja. She cried and was terrified, saying, "Please let me go. Mommy, I want mommy. I miss my mommy. Save me, mommy." Itachi yelled angrily, "You bastard, let her go now, she's just an innocent civilian." The stone ninja took a kunai and placed it on the young girl's neck, saying, "I will kill her if you move an inch to try to save your friend over there." Itachi lowered his katana in rage and stood down, knowing that if he made a single mistake, he would kill the young girl. Like the other villagers, she was innocent and had nothing to do with the whole conflict. He would be too damned to allow any more innocent people to be killed for the sake of this war. He looked at Shisui's location and gasped, but his face was filled with worry until he noticed that Shisui had kicked and punched one of the stone ninjas. When the young Uchiha opened his eyes and saw the crimson orb with 2 tomos, he had finally unlocked his Sharingan, which was the true surprise. The sight of, "Shisui, you did it," made Itachi smile. The stone ninja who was closest to the young Uchiha exclaimed, "What the hell?" Shisui used a kunai to stab the second stone ninja in the heart as they charged at him. "You son of a..." Shisui used his kunai to cut his neck, causing the blood to spill onto the ground. With the death of both ninjas, he was finished. "You did it, Shisui. You unlocked your Sharingan," Itachi exclaimed to his closest companion. Hearing his voice, Shisui grinned and said, "Hey, I know I can see his chakra." After witnessing the entire incident, the stone ninjas who were holding the young girl hostage exclaimed, "That's it, I'm not staying here to die, I'm out of here," and began to flee, taking the young girl with him. Itachi rushed at him, preparing to slay him with his katana, saying, "You're not going anywhere." She was still crying as the stone ninja held his kunai to her neck. "Brat, if you don't let me go, then the kid dies, was it going to be?" she asked. Instead of responding to him, Itachi leapt to a great height and raised his katana. His attack was well planned. He intended to hit him without hurting the young girl, but he had no idea what would happen next. Cowardly, the stone ninja lifted the young girl up directly at him by using her as a shield. Itachi was appalled, but it was too late to halt the assault, and he ultimately used his katana to stab the child. The young girl was struck in a critical area, her body was covered in blood, and she passed away before she could say another word. Itachi's hands were shaking and he was still too shocked by what he had done. He killed an innocent girl who was only 5 years old and unable to defend herself, as evidenced by his hands and katana, which were both covered in her blood. After witnessing the entire incident, the stone ninja smiled and said, "That was a good attack, you really nailed her." The stone ninja eventually stopped running like a coward, but he didn't make it very far before someone else used a katana to decapitate him. When Itachi looked up, he saw a young man in his late 20s dressed in a Konoha Junin uniform. He knew who he was. Tears were streaming from Itachi's Sharingan eyes as he said, "Papa." "Itachi, are you okay?" Fugaku asked his son. When Shisui arrived and saw the little girl's lifeless body, the young Uchiha nodded while crying. "No, that bastard killed her, and we couldn't save her," Shisui sobbed. "No Shisui, it wasn't that stone ninja that killed Hera, it was Maya." "Wada!" Shisui exclaimed in shock. As he finally turned off his Sharingan, Itachi sobbed, "I was going to attack him but he then used her as a human shield, the coward, I couldn't stop my attack and I killed Hera. I didn't mean it." Fugaku put his hand on the young boy's shoulder and said, "Itachi, don't worry, it wasn't your fault." "What but Iya?" Itachi said, still in tears. "This sort of things always happens in war, no one is Safia." "I apologize, Itachi," Shisui said quietly. Itachi began, "Papa the villager, sir," but his father interrupted him. Fugaku murmured. We couldn't save them. By the time we arrived they were already killed by the stone ninjas. There was nothing we could do. We were too ladia. Itachi questioned. Why do so many people have to die? It's clear why, Fugaku, the Uchiha clan's leader, retorted. This is war and death is always inevitable no matter who they are, as hidden stone anyone and the civilians that get caught in the middle of the conflict. Fugaku went on. Shisui tried to comfort Itachi while he stood quietly drying his tears, but it was in vain because he was too damaged and broken to feel better at the moment. Come on, let's get going. You two, we have taken care of the stone ninjas in this area. We're regrouping with the rest of the team, Fugaku replied. Before leaving with Fugaku, the two Uchiha nodded. Itachi looked at the little girl's lifeless body one last time before turning to face the future. He was now aware of the reality of the conflicto Wara and the irreversible harm it causes. With a dejected expression on his face, the young Uchiha thought, so, this is war. Flashback. Come to an end. On that day I saw the truth about war, and it's like an endless disease that kills people after another, not caring who they are, whether if they are from Konoha or any other hidden village, to just simply civilians, and for what war is made. Honor and glory. I don't need something so ignorant and meaningless. I have learned the hard way about war, and nothing good comes from it, just nothing but pain, suffering and death. On that day I secretly promised myself one thing, to do everything that is necessary in my power to prevent another war from happening, and that includes killing the Uchiha clan and my family. It was better for the members of the clan to suffer the consequences for their action in planning the revolt rather than the entire village of Konoha, stated Itachi. Since Itachi began narrating his story, Naruto has remained silent. Words would not escape his lips because he was simply too shocked to speak. He was now looking at someone who had seen the grim and icy reality of war, and the older Uchiha's story was simply too tragic and agonizing to say a word. At least he now knew why he detested war so much and was prepared to sacrifice his own clan in order to stop it. Since learning about this new side of Itachi, he has gained a great deal of respect and admiration. He was looking at a man who gave up everything he held dear and valuable in order to stop another war from breaking out and more people from losing their lives.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.